Recovery Kernel. Understanding the biology beneath the battle. J.R. Token, the system architect S. Warning sign, harm reduction resource, not medical advice.
Dedication. For the ones who ran out of time before anyone told them that what drove them to the substance was biology, not weakness. This book is dedicated to the proposition that no one should have to spend 15 years and $1 million in failed treatment before discovering that their brain was never broken. It was just running on the wrong repair manual. The manual follows. About the architect, J.R. Token.
A note on where this came from. I am not a doctor. I want to be clear about that from the first page, not as a disclaimer designed to protect me legally, but as an honest description of what I actually am and why that matters. I am a computer systems architect. I build and debug complex systems for a living. I understand how systems fail, how to trace a failure back to its root cause, and how to design an intervention that addresses the cause rather than covering the symptom. For 15 years, I applied every other kind of expertise I could find to my own recovery: clinical, therapeutic, pharmaceutical, spiritual, with limited success. Eventually, I applied the only lens that had consistently worked for me in other domains: the engineering lens. What I found changed everything. After $1.5 million in hospitalizations, dozens of failed medication trials, and a period when my monthly treatment costs were reaching $8,000 with no measurable improvement, I stopped asking, what treatment should I try next, and started asking, why is the treatment failing? The difference between those two questions is the difference between this book and every other recovery book I had read. The answer, it turned out, was largely genetic, not genetic determinism. The position that my genes made addiction inevitable. But genetic architecture, the specific variants in my MTHFR, COMT, and CYP450 genes that created the precise neurochemical vulnerabilities that made certain substances feel necessary rather than recreational, that made standard medications either ineffective or destabilizing, and that made the standard treatment protocols, designed for an average patient I did not biologically resemble, fail predictably. I tested my protocol for 10 years before writing this book. I am not writing from theory. I am writing from a mapped system, documented over a decade, that works for the specific architecture I have. The work in this book could have been identified in weeks with proper genetic testing. It took 15 years because nobody thought to look. This book is the repair manual nobody gave me. It is for anyone who has tried the standard approaches and found them inadequate, not because they failed to try hard enough, but because they were handed the wrong manual for their hardware. You are not broken. You are running a system that has never been properly diagnosed. Let us begin the diagnosis. How to use this book: a map before the territory. The structure of what follows. This book is organized as a diagnostic and repair sequence, not a self-help narrative. It does not begin with inspiration and end with testimony. It begins with the machinery, your specific genetic architecture, and moves through increasingly practical territory as the machinery becomes clear. Part 1. The architecture: why willpower alone cannot solve a hardware problem. The three genetic systems, MTHFR, neurotransmitter supply, COMT, stress clearance, and CYP450, drug metabolism, that together determine your vulnerability profile. How they interact. What happens when multiple variants collide? Part 2. The evidence. The forensic record: 60 years of preventable deaths among people who had access to every resource except the right information. These are not cautionary tales about excess. They are case studies in systematic diagnostic failure. Part 3. The protocols. The harm reduction protocols for those who are still using. The methylation and COMT support protocols for rebuilding baseline neurochemistry. The epigenetic guidance for matching your lifestyle to your actual genetic architecture. Part 4. The maintenance. The long game. How to sustain the changes the protocols produce. How to use genetic testing to refine the approach. How to build a life around your specific wiring rather than against it. You do not need to read this book in order. If you are in active crisis, the crisis resources at the front matter are there. If you want to understand the genetics first, start at part 1. If you want to see the case for why this approach matters before engaging with the science, the forensics section in part 2 can serve as that argument. Follow the path that your current situation requires.
Critical note, this is harm reduction, not medical advice. Everything in this book is harm reduction and educational information. None of it constitutes medical advice, and none of it is a substitute for medical care. If you are experiencing a medical emergency, call 911. If you are experiencing suicidal ideation, call or text 988. If you are in acute withdrawal from alcohol or benzodiazepines, do not manage that alone. It can kill you. Medical supervision is required. The supplement protocols and genetic information in this book are supported by published research. They are also more aggressive than many mainstream practitioners will be comfortable with. Know your own medical situation. Work with a provider who is willing to engage with the pharmacogenomic approach. This book gives you the framework and the questions. The qualified professional gives you the implementation support. Who this book is and is not, for read this before anything else. The Architect's Honest Assessment. Before you read another page of this book, I want to be direct with you about what it is and what it is not. Not as a legal disclaimer, as an honest account of who will benefit from this and who might be harmed by approaching it the wrong way. This book came from 15 years of personal failure with conventional treatment, followed by a decade of systematic experimentation with a pharmacogenomic framework that eventually produced something that worked. For me, with my specific genetic architecture, in my specific situation. That is the limit of my authority here. I am not a physician. I am not reporting the results of a randomized controlled trial. I am reporting the results of one deeply motivated systems engineer debugging one complex biological system, with reference to the research literature that helped me understand what I was observing. That context changes what this book is and is not for.
This book is for you if you have tried conventional treatment approaches, therapy, standard medications, 12-step programs, willpower, and found them inadequate. Not because you did not commit to them seriously, but because they did not address something that seems to be operating at a deeper level. You are treatment resistant. Medications have failed in unusual ways, at doses that should have worked, or with side effects that suggest your metabolism is processing them differently than anticipated. You want to understand the biological architecture beneath the behavioral patterns. Not to excuse anything, but to address the actual system rather than its outputs. You are in a stable enough state to read carefully and engage with complex information. This book requires active thinking, not passive absorption. You have access to a physician, pharmacist, or other qualified clinician who is willing to engage with the pharmacogenomic approach, or you are working toward obtaining that access. You are willing to use this as one lens among several, not as a complete system that replaces everything else, but as a framework that adds precision to whatever else you are doing. This book is not the right primary resource if you are in acute medical withdrawal from alcohol or benzodiazepines. This is a medical emergency requiring supervision. This book cannot help you with seizure prevention. Please contact a medical provider immediately. You are experiencing active psychosis or severe psychiatric instability. The information density and the occasional intensity of the material can be disorienting for someone in that state. Stabilize first. You are pregnant. Several supplement protocols in this book have not been established as safe in pregnancy. Please consult with your obstetric provider before implementing anything. You have severe liver disease. Your ability to metabolize many of the supplements discussed is significantly altered. The standard protocols do not apply without medical modification. You have a personal or family history of severe bipolar disorder. Some supplements, particularly SAMe and high-dose B vitamins, can precipitate mania in predisposed individuals. Proceed only under psychiatric supervision. You have a seizure disorder. Several combinations discussed in the harm reduction sections carry seizure risk. This is explicitly noted where relevant, but the general caution applies. You are currently managing polypharmacy with cardiac medications. Drug interactions in this context require individualized pharmacist review before adding anything. And you are looking for a book that will tell you exactly what to do. This book will tell you what questions to ask and what options exist. The answers for your specific situation require your specific clinical context, a note on evidence and authority. This book makes claims across a wide range of confidence levels, from well-established clinical facts, CYP2D6 status is clinically actionable for codeine prescribing, that is an FDA labeling, to the author's working hypotheses about what patterns mean. The genetic profiles proposed for the celebrity case studies are analytical inferences, not confirmed diagnoses. Throughout the book, you will find an evidence tier notation system that marks each major claim according to its level of support. Those tiers are established, strong consensus from multiple trials, probable, consistent observational and mechanistic data, emerging, promising early signals, plausible mechanisms, author/system experience, patterns observed in recovery communities and the author's own experience, worth testing personally under supervision, and controversial/mixed, active debate in the literature. When you see a claim without a tier marker, it is because it is either sufficiently basic that its status is obvious, drinking water is good for you, or because it appears in a section where the tier has been established at the opening and applies throughout. If you are ever uncertain about the evidence level for a specific claim, that uncertainty is appropriate, and the right response is to bring the claim to a clinician who can evaluate it in your context. This book is intended to help you ask better questions of your healthcare providers, not to replace those providers. It is intended to give you a framework for understanding why certain approaches may have failed and what alternatives might be worth exploring, not to prescribe a treatment plan. The distinction matters, and I want it to be clear from the beginning. Quick start boot sequence if you are overwhelmed and need to know where to begin. For the reader who cannot process the whole book right now. If you are in crisis, in acute distress, or simply overwhelmed by the scope of what you are facing, this section is for you. You do not need to read the whole book to start moving in the right direction. The following sequence represents the highest return first steps, the moves that matter most, in the order they matter most, regardless of your specific genetic profile or substance history. Read this page. Implement what you can. Return to the rest when you are ready. The 5-step boot sequence. Step 1. Stay alive. Do this first, always. If you are in immediate danger of harming yourself or others, call 911 now. If you are experiencing suicidal ideation, call or text 988 now. If you have taken a substance and are experiencing chest pain, difficulty breathing, seizures, or loss of consciousness, call 911 now. If none of those apply and you are in active withdrawal from alcohol or benzodiazepines, do not manage this alone. Contact a medical provider today. Withdrawal from these substances can cause fatal seizures. Everything else in this book assumes you are physically safe. If you are not, that comes first. Carry naloxone, Narcan, if you or anyone in your household uses opioids, or if you are uncertain what substances someone near you may be using. It is available without a prescription at most U.S. pharmacies. Its presence is not an endorsement of continued use. It is the difference between an overdose being survivable and not. Step 2. Stabilize the biology. This week. Before any higher-order recovery work is possible, the basic biological conditions must be met. 3 things will make everything else more accessible. Sleep. If you are sleeping fewer than 5 hours regularly, that is the first priority above everything else. Sleep deprivation produces cognitive impairment that makes every other recovery intervention less effective. The sleep protocols are in Chapter 9 and Protocol 17. Hydration and food. Dehydration and blood sugar instability each mimic and amplify psychological distress in documented ways. Drink water consistently. Eat protein with each meal. This is not trivial advice. It is the biological floor below which nothing else works well. Medical stabilization. If you are in acute withdrawal, using substances that have produced medical complications, or taking medications that may be interacting badly, those require medical attention before the framework. In this book can be usefully applied. The book is a long game tool. The immediate medical situation is a right now tool. Step 3. Understand your basic architecture this month. 2 questions will orient you faster than anything else. Are you a warrior or a worrier? The COMT self-assessment in Chapter 3 takes 15 minutes and gives you a working hypothesis about your stress clearance architecture. This shapes which recovery approaches are matched to your biology and which will produce friction. Is methylation likely involved? The MTHFR self-assessment in Chapter 2 gives you a probability estimate based on symptom patterns. If your score is above 16, a methylfolate trial and a homocysteine blood test are worth discussing with your physician. You do not need genetic testing to begin. The self-assessments are designed to work with observable patterns. Testing confirms and refines. It does not have to precede action. Step 4. Address the highest risk pharmacological vulnerabilities. This month. If you are currently taking or may be prescribed medications, one question is worth addressing urgently. Do you know your CYP2D6 status? If you are in recovery from opioid use disorder and have ever felt that opioid pain medications either did not work or worked far more intensely than they should have, CYP2D6 testing is clinically important. It costs approximately $200 at self-pay and is often covered by insurance. It can prevent a future prescription from being either ineffective or fatal. Check your current medications and supplements against a drug interaction checker, drugs.com or Medscape, both free, before adding anything new. This habit takes 2 minutes and has a documented history of preventing harm. Step 5. Build the long game this year. With safety established, basic biology stabilized, and your general genetic architecture mapped, you are in a position to engage with the full framework. The 3-phase restoration protocol, the epigenetic activity matching, the supplement protocol calibrated to your specific profile. The long game is not urgent in the way the first 4 steps are, but it is where the durable change happens, where the neurochemical floor is rebuilt, where the lifestyle becomes matched to the biology, where recovery shifts from something you are maintaining through effort to something your system is actually designed to support. Start with Part 1 of this book. Read it in order. Complete the self-assessments. Then return to this quick start guide and map what you have learned onto the 5 steps. The framework will mean more with the biology behind it. Where to go next? You are in crisis right now. You want to understand why you became addicted. You want to know what went wrong with past treatment. You want to see the stakes clearly. You are still using and want to reduce harm now. You are in acute withdrawal and need biological support. You want to build a life that supports your biology. You need clinical reference tables. You want to use AI tools with your genetic profile. What you need. Where to find it. Emergency triage and stabilization. Page 1 of this book, call 911 or 988. The biology of vulnerability. Part 1, chapters 1 through 5. Why standard approaches fail certain profiles. Chapter 4, CYP450, and Chapter 5, combined effects. The forensic record of what happens without this information. Part 2, the case files. Harm reduction protocols. Chapter 7, the HPA axis and oxytocin protocol. Chapter 8, the epigenetic activity framework. Chapter 9, pharmacogenomic interaction matrices, Appendix A, structured prompts and boundaries. Appendix B, evidence tier legend, how to read the confidence levels in this book. This book makes claims across a wide range of evidence levels, rather than pretending all claims carry equivalent authority or burying every statement in so many qualifications that the practical value disappears. We use a consistent visual tier system throughout. Every major therapeutic claim is marked with one of the following tiers. The tiers appear in the margin of relevant boxes and in the text of sections where the evidence level is not obvious from context. When you see a claim without a tier marker, it is either a well-established basic fact, or the tier has been established for the whole section at its opening. Established, probable, emerging. Author/system experience. Controversial/mixed. How to use this system practically. When you read an established claim, you can bring it to your clinician with confidence that it is supported by clinical guidelines. When you read a probable or emerging claim, bring it as a question. I've read that this association exists. What do you think given my situation? When you read an author/system experience claim, treat it as a hypothesis worth testing, not a fact worth acting on without monitoring. When you read controversial mixed, bring the controversy itself to the conversation. I've seen mixed evidence on this. How do you weigh it? The goal of this system is not to undermine the book's usefulness. It is to make it sustainably useful, to give you a framework you can bring to clinical conversations with appropriate confidence, rather than one that gets dismissed the moment a practitioner identifies overreach. The warrior and worrier archetypes are real patterns that real people recognize in themselves. The supplement protocols are based on real mechanisms. The appropriate confidence level for each specific claim is the one this system attempts to provide. A note on how this book uses language, the difference between association and causation, and why it matters here. Why the language precision is not hedging. One of the most common criticisms of pharmacogenomic writing for general audiences is that it oscillates between two failure modes. The first is vague overcaution that renders every claim so qualified it provides no guidance. The second is confident overstatement that presents associations as mechanisms and correlations as causes. This book attempts a third approach. The voice is direct, the recommendations are actionable, but the epistemic register, the specific words used to describe what genes do, what variants predict, and what supplements accomplish, is chosen to reflect the actual state of the evidence rather than to maximize persuasiveness. The following table shows the phrase patterns used throughout and what they are intended to convey. If you notice language that does not match these patterns, that is worth flagging. It may indicate a section that requires revision, or it may indicate that the evidence for that specific claim is stronger than the general category. Phrase used. What it is intended to convey is associated with. A statistical relationship exists between this variant and this outcome in studied populations. The relationship does not imply that the variant is the sole cause, or that everyone with the variant will show the outcome, may contribute to. This variant is plausibly involved in the mechanism. But multiple factors are involved, and the contribution of this specific variant is not definitively established. Can increase vulnerability to. In population studies, people with this variant show higher rates of this outcome. This is a risk factor statement, not a deterministic one. Most people with the variant will not show the outcome. Is consistent with. In case files, the observed clinical pattern in this individual could plausibly be explained by this genetic variant. It is not a diagnosis. It is a hypothesis generated by applying the pharmacogenomic framework retroactively. In some people, for many, the effect is not universal. Individual variation is real and documented. These qualifiers are not rhetorical softening. They reflect that the same intervention produces different results in different people. Discuss with your clinician. This is not bureaucratic cover. It is a genuine recommendation that the specific claim has enough complexity or individual variability that your prescriber's knowledge of your full medical context is required to apply it safely. High priority, replacing not optional. This intervention has strong evidence and meaningful impact for most people in this situation. It is strongly recommended. It is not, however, something where the author has the authority to declare it non-negotiable for your specific biology. Is associated with reduced / has been shown to support. This intervention has evidence behind it. But the effect size, the population it was studied in, and the individual variation in response mean it should be approached as a likely benefit to test, not a guaranteed outcome. Evidence tier, established / probable / emerging. The explicit tier marking tells you how much confidence to place in the specific claim. Read established with confidence. Read emerging as a hypothesis worth exploring. The claims this book does not make. For absolute clarity, here are the claims this book does not make, regardless of how any specific sentence might read in isolation. That any specific genetic variant causes addiction. Variants are associated with increased vulnerability in studied populations. They are not destiny. That the supplement protocols will work for everyone. Individual variation is real. These protocols are based on mechanisms that apply in general, with effects that vary significantly by individual. That genetic testing eliminates the need for clinical judgment. It informs clinical judgment. It does not replace it. That the celebrity genetic hypotheses are confirmed diagnoses. They are analytical inferences generated by applying the pharmacogenomic framework to publicly available clinical information. They are educational models, not confirmed medical histories. That this framework is a complete treatment system. It is a lens. The most effective recovery programs integrate multiple approaches. This book provides one important component of a larger picture. That any intervention described here is safe for everyone. Contraindications are noted throughout. The absence of a noted contraindication for your specific situation does not mean one does not exist. Bring everything to your clinician. Part 1. The architecture, understanding the hardware before you blame the operator. Chapter 1. Why willpower isn't enough. The biology of addiction, a hardware problem in a software world. The architect's opening. Consider what we tell a person with type 1 diabetes who cannot produce insulin. We do not tell them to try harder. We do not suggest that with sufficient willpower, they could generate the molecule their pancreas lacks the machinery to make. We identify the deficit, understand the mechanism, and supply what the biological system cannot produce on its own. Now consider what we tell a person with addiction. We tell them to want recovery more, to commit more deeply, to find the strength they already have, to lean on their higher power, their community, their loved ones, their willpower. We treat the failure of these interventions as evidence of insufficient character. We are prescribing a software solution to a hardware fault, and we call the person broken when it doesn't work. For 25 years, I tried the willpower approach. I tried it with genuine effort, genuine commitment, and genuine desperation. I failed, not because I lacked the will to succeed, but because the framework I was given was wrong. Not wrong in some minor, adjustable way. Architecturally wrong, at the root, in a way that no amount of sincere effort could compensate for. The repair manual I was handed described a different machine. 1.1. The computational error. What addiction actually is. Addiction is not a moral failing. It is not a character defect. It is not a spiritual wound, though it may become one. At its root, addiction is a computational error in a survival system. Your brain's primary function is to keep you alive. To accomplish this, it continuously monitors your internal state, your stress levels, your pain, your emotional experience, and compares what it observes to what it predicts. When there is a significant mismatch between what the brain expects, stability, safety, adequacy, and what it detects, distress, deficit, dysphoria, it generates an error signal. That error signal drives behavior aimed at resolution. In a brain with adequate neurochemistry, the error signals generated by ordinary stress are resolved by ordinary means: movement, rest, connection, creative work, the passage of time. The brain has tools that work. But when the brain's neurochemical baseline is genuinely depleted, when the production machinery runs at reduced capacity, or the clearance systems are overwhelmed, or the metabolic pathways that convert nutrients into neurotransmitters are genetically throttled. Those ordinary tools do not generate sufficient response. The signal remains. The error persists. The brain keeps searching. The first calculation. The first time someone with a depleted neurochemical baseline encounters a substance that addresses that deficit, even temporarily, even destructively, their brain performs a calculation that is entirely rational from its own perspective. Error detected. Significant internal distress, persistent and unresolved. Solution attempted. Substance. Result. Error resolved. Temporarily, powerfully, completely. The brain does not record, "This solution is unsustainable," or "This solution will eventually make the underlying problem worse." It records, "This worked." And that calculation, encoded at a survival level, is what we are asking willpower to override. We are asking the rational calculation to be overridden by a decision to accept persistent distress in exchange for the theoretical future benefit of not being dependent. For a brain running on inadequate neurochemistry, that is not a straightforward calculation. The crisis state brain, when the system goes into emergency mode. After sustained substance use, the brain enters what we might call a crisis state, a condition in which the neurological landscape has reorganized around the substance's presence in ways that make normal function, without it, impossible. Reward deficiency syndrome. Dopamine receptors downregulate in response to chronic flooding. Even with the substance present, less pleasure is produced. Without it, near zero pleasure from anything. Anti-reward system activation. The brain's stress circuits become hyperactive, generating constant internal distress, anxiety, irritability, emotional pain, that only the substance temporarily resolves. Prefrontal cortex suppression. The brain's executive center goes quiet under chronic stress. Decisions are now made by the amygdala, the ancient alarm system, rather than the frontal cortex that plans, weighs consequences, and considers alternatives. This is precisely why telling someone in crisis to use their willpower fails so consistently. Willpower lives in the prefrontal cortex. In the crisis state brain, the prefrontal cortex is offline. You are asking someone to access a resource that their current neurological state has made temporarily unavailable. This is not metaphor. This is neuroscience. 1.2 The new map from character to biology, a paradigm that actually works. The old model, why it fails. The new model, why it works.
Addiction is a choice, a failure of character or willpower.
Addiction is a biological adaptation to a neurochemical environment the brain experiences as a deficit.
Treatment focuses on breaking habits through moral effort.
Treatment focuses on identifying and correcting the underlying neurochemical and genetic architecture.
Relapse means the person did not try hard enough.
Relapse is a symptom of incomplete biological restoration. The deficit has not yet been addressed.
One-size-fits-all programs can work if the person commits fully.
Effective treatment is necessarily personalized. Different genetic profiles require different interventions.
The paradigm shift that changes everything. When you understand that your brain followed a survival-level program in turning to substances, that the calculation was rational, given the neurochemical conditions it was operating in, you can stop fighting your biology and start working with it. Recovery is not about becoming a different person. It is not about finding a strength you lacked. It is about understanding the person you actually are, including the specific genetic architecture that created your specific vulnerabilities, and building a life that supports your neurochemistry rather than fighting it. This is not an excuse for harm caused. Understanding the mechanism does not dissolve responsibility for the consequences, but it changes the question from "why am I so weak?" to "what does my specific system actually need?" And that is the question that leads somewhere. Chapter 2, The Supply System, your MTHFR gene and the bandwidth of the brain. The architect's log. Imagine a data center, rows of servers, billions of processes running every second. Now imagine the power supply to that data center is throttled, not cut off, but running at 30 to 40% of capacity. Every server still works. But processes slow, errors accumulate, and the system compensates in ways that look, from the outside, like dysfunction or disease. That throttled power supply is your MTHFR gene. It does not make neurotransmitters directly. It makes the raw materials, the bandwidth, your brain needs to manufacture them. When MTHFR is compromised, you are not broken, you are bottlenecked. And this is important. Bottlenecks can be bypassed. 2.1 The methylation cycle, the process that builds your brain chemistry. MTHFR, methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, is a single gene encoding a single enzyme that occupies the rate-limiting position in the methylation cycle. Methylation is the biochemical process by which your body transfers methyl groups between molecules, and it governs an extraordinary range of functions: DNA repair, detoxification, immune regulation, and most critically for this discussion, the synthesis of neurotransmitters. What MTHFR actually controls: conversion of dietary folate to 5-MTHF, the active, bioavailable form the brain can use. Production of SAMe, S-adenosylmethionine, the universal methyl donor required for neurotransmitter synthesis. Recycling of homocysteine, a toxic byproduct that accumulates when methylation is impaired. Support for BH4, tetrahydrobiopterin, the cofactor required by the enzymes that actually build dopamine and serotonin. The cascade effect. When MTHFR runs slowly, folate backs up in unusable form, homocysteine accumulates, SAMe production drops, BH4 recycling fails, neurotransmitter synthesis stalls. This is not a software bug. It is a hardware limitation written into your DNA. 2.2 The variance. How fast is your factory running? Your MTHFR gene exists in a specific configuration determined by your parents' genetic contributions. That configuration sets your baseline methylation speed, and therefore your baseline neurotransmitter production capacity. Variant. Enzyme activity. Population prevalence. What it means practically. C677TC/C wild type. 100%. Approximately 40 to 50% of people. Full methylation capacity, no intervention typically required. C677TC/T heterozygous, 60 to 65%. And approximately 35 to 40% of people, moderate reduction. May benefit from methylfolate support, especially under stress. C677T/T homozygous, 30 to 40%. 10 to 15% Caucasian, up to 25% Hispanic. Significant bottleneck, methylfolate supplementation strongly recommended. Compound heterozygous, C677TC/T plus A1298CA/C. Variable, often equivalent to T/T. Approximately 10 to 15% of people. Effects multiply. Treat as T/T for supplementation purposes. The toxic backlog, homocysteine. When the methylation cycle slows, its toxic byproduct, homocysteine, accumulates. Homocysteine is not merely a marker of impaired methylation. It is actively harmful to the brain and cardiovascular system through multiple mechanisms. Neurotoxicity overactivates NMDA receptors, producing excitotoxicity and neuronal damage. Neuroinflammation triggers inflammatory cascades that reduce neurotransmitter production capacity. Oxidative stress generates reactive oxygen species that damage cellular structures. Vascular damage injures blood vessel walls, reducing oxygen supply to brain tissue. Your homocysteine target optimal is below 8 micromoles per liter. Acceptable is below 12 micromoles per liter. Above 12 requires intervention. Above 15 requires urgent intervention. A standard blood test, often covered by insurance, can measure this. It is the most accessible proxy for MTHFR impairment available without genetic testing. 2.3. The addiction connection. Why your brain experienced the substance is necessary. What they never told you. When you first used substances and felt for perhaps the first time that something was finally right. When the anxiety lifted or the numbness receded or the world became navigable in a way it had not been before, you were not discovering a high. You were experiencing adequate neurochemistry for the first time. The substance did not add something foreign to your system. It temporarily bypassed the bottleneck. It provided what the methylation cycle could not produce at sufficient volume. The tragedy is not that you found something that worked. The tragedy is that no one told you the bottleneck could be bypassed without the substance, through a targeted supplementation protocol that costs less per month than a single gram of cocaine and produces none of the downstream damage. The recovery question is not, how do I stop wanting what makes me feel functional? The recovery question is, how do I build a neurochemical foundation that makes me functional without the substance? These are different questions, and they lead to different places. 2.4. The MTHFR protocol, bypassing the bottleneck. The intervention for MTHFR impairment is architecturally elegant. If the enzyme that converts folate to its active form is impaired, bypass the enzyme. Supply the active form directly. The methylation restoration protocol, 3 tiers. Tier 1, the bypass, essential. L-methylfolate 7.5 to 15 milligrams daily. The active form bypasses MTHFR entirely. Do not substitute folic acid. See critical warning below. Methylcobalamin 5,000 micrograms sublingual daily, active B12. Required cofactor for the full methylation cycle. Magnesium glycinate 400 to 600 milligrams daily. Methylation cofactor. Also supports COMT function in sleep. Tier 2, the accelerators, recommended. TMG betaine 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams daily provides an alternative homocysteine clearing pathway. P5P, pyridoxal 5-phosphate, 25 to 50 milligrams daily. Active B6, required cofactor for serotonin, GABA, and dopamine synthesis. Riboflavin B2, 400 milligrams daily, stabilizes the MTHFR enzyme itself in T/T genotype. Tier 3, the optimizers, advanced. NAC, N-acetylcysteine, 1,200 to 1,800 milligrams daily, glutathione precursor, reduces oxidative stress and neuroinflammation. Alpha-lipoic acid, 300 to 600 milligrams daily, mitochondrial function and antioxidant support. Omega-3s, EPA/DHA, 2 to 3 grams daily, reduces the neuroinflammation that compounds MTHFR-related deficits. Critical warning, synthetic folic acid, the saboteur. People with MTHFR variants, especially T/T, must avoid synthetic folic acid. This point is not negotiable, and it is counterintuitive enough to bear explaining carefully. Synthetic folic acid, the form in fortified foods, most cheap multivitamins, and the folic acid supplements sold in every pharmacy, cannot be efficiently converted by a compromised MTHFR enzyme. Unconverted folic acid does not simply exit the body harmlessly. It accumulates in circulation and actively blocks the enzyme binding sites that would otherwise process the naturally occurring forms of folate from food. The result, taking synthetic folic acid with MTHFR impairment further reduces your already limited methylation capacity. The rule, read every label. If it says folic acid, put it back. Look for methylfolate, L-methylfolate, 5-MTHF, or quetrafolic. These are the bioavailable forms that bypass the impaired enzyme. This single substitution can make the difference between a supplement stack that helps and one that quietly makes the underlying problem worse. 2.5. The implementation. An 8-week ramp. Methylation restoration is not an overnight event. The system that was running at reduced capacity for years requires time to recalibrate. Starting too fast produces overmethylation symptoms, anxiety, insomnia, irritability, as the brain adjusts to neurochemical levels it has not experienced before. Start low, increase deliberately. Weak methylfolate dose. Additions. What to watch. 1 to 2. 400 to 800 micrograms daily. Methylcobalamin 1000 micrograms. Magnesium 400 milligrams. Energy, mood, sleep quality, establish baseline. 3 to 4, 1 to 5 milligrams daily if tolerating well. Add P5, P25 milligrams daily. Mood stabilization. Any activation symptoms, anxiety, racing thoughts, reduce dose if present. 5 to 6, toward 7.5 to 15 milligrams, add TMG 1000 milligrams. Increase B12 to 5000 micrograms. Add riboflavin 400 milligrams, T/T. Full protocol establishing rate improvement on 1 to 10 scale. 7 to 8. Full therapeutic range. Full protocol in place. Request homocysteine blood test. Adjust based on response. Commit to 6-month restoration timeline. What to expect, the restoration timeline. Weeks 1 to 2. Variable. Some feel immediate energy and mood lift. Others notice nothing yet. Both are normal. Weeks 4 to 6. Brain fog begins to clear. Mood stabilizes. Energy becomes more consistent. This is the methylation cycle coming back online. Month 3. Significant improvement in emotional resilience. Stress tolerance increases. Baseline mood elevated. Cravings often reduce 50 to 70%. Month 6 plus. Full restoration of methylation cycle. Homocysteine normalized. New neurochemical baseline established. Ongoing MTHFR is genetic. The enzyme will always be compromised. Supplementation is maintenance, not cure. Plan for lifelong support at maintenance doses. 2.6 Self-assessment. Are you running on a throttled supply line? You do not need genetic testing to suspect MTHFR involvement. Pattern recognition, the particular shape of your experience, is often sufficient to justify a methylfolate trial. Rate each statement from 0, not at all, to 3, always. Statement. Rate 0 to 3. Long-standing depression or anxiety that began early in life, teens or earlier. Underscore. Antidepressants that were ineffective or only partially effective. Underscore. Chronic fatigue despite adequate sleep. Underscore. Brain fog or persistent difficulty concentrating. Underscore. Frequent headaches or migraines. Underscore. Chronic pain or heightened sensitivity to pain. Underscore.
Stress that completely overwhelms me, making clear thinking impossible.
Underscore.
When I first used substances, they made me feel normal, not just high.
Underscore. Family history of heart disease, stroke, or early dementia. Underscore. Strong preference for depressant substances, alcohol, opioids, benzodiazepines. Underscore. Score range. Likelihood. Recommended action. 0 to 8. Low. MTHFR variant unlikely to be primary driver. Standard protocols likely sufficient. Maintain general methylation hygiene. 9 to 16. Moderate. Consider MTHFR involvement. Methylfolate trial at low dose, 400 to 800 micrograms. Monitor response over 4 to 6 weeks. 17 to 24. High MTHFR involvement, likely genetic testing recommended. Start methylation protocol, homocysteine blood test. 25 plus. Very high MTHFR involvement probable. Prioritize methylation protocol immediately. Genetic testing to confirm and optimize dosing. Chapter 3, the clearance system. Your COMT gene and the speed of recovery from stress. The architect's log. Every thought you think, every stress you navigate, every emotion you feel, all of it produces chemical signals in your brain that must be cleared after they have delivered their message. If they are not cleared, they accumulate. The signal becomes noise. The system overloads. Your brain's primary clearing enzyme for dopamine, norepinephrine, and epinephrine in the prefrontal cortex is COMT, catechol O methyltransferase. The speed of your COMT enzyme is determined by a single genetic variant. And that speed creates two dramatically different neurological realities that explain, with surprising precision, why certain people gravitate toward certain substances. Neither reality is better or worse. They are different architectures, optimized for different environments, carrying different vulnerabilities. 3.1 The Val 158. Met variant warriors, and everyone between. The COMT gene has one clinically dominant variant, Val 158 Met. The amino acid present at position 158 of the enzyme determines how quickly it clears catecholamines from your synapses. This single position creates the two ends of a spectrum that shapes your entire stress response and, by extension, your relationship to substances. Val/Val, the warrior genotype, fast clearance. Dopamine and norepinephrine are cleared from the prefrontal cortex quickly. The advantage: low baseline anxiety, strong performance under acute stress, resilience in chaotic environments, calm under pressure. The warrior brain does not get stuck in stress loops. The chemistry clears before it can accumulate to overwhelming levels. The vulnerability: because dopamine clears so fast, the warrior brain runs at a low baseline dopamine level under ordinary conditions. Ordinary life, routine, predictable, unstimulating, can feel genuinely flat. The warrior may seek stimulants not for pleasure, but because stimulant-level dopamine is what functional actually feels like for their specific architecture. This is not character weakness. It is receptor-level reality. Met/Met, the warrior genotype, slow clearance. Dopamine and norepinephrine linger in the synapse after delivery, accumulating with each new stress signal. The advantage: exceptional performance in calm, complex cognitive environments. The warrior brain is often extraordinarily capable at detail-oriented work, analysis, creative synthesis, and any domain that rewards depth over speed. The warrior under ideal conditions is often remarkable. The vulnerability: under stress, the accumulation becomes a flood. Where the warrior experiences acute stress as manageable and recoverable, the warrior experiences it as overwhelming and lasting. Anxiety that would dissipate in a warrior brain within minutes may linger for hours or days in a warrior brain because the chemistry cannot clear fast enough. The warrior may turn to depressant substances, alcohol, benzodiazepines, opioids, not for intoxication, but because those substances accomplish chemically what the COMT enzyme cannot accomplish quickly enough on its own. They quiet the accumulating noise. Val/Met, the balanced genotype, intermediate clearance speed. Generally adaptable across environments, with moderate vulnerability at the extremes of stress or understimulation. The balanced genotype typically lacks the specific intense vulnerability pattern of the warrior or worrier, but is also missing the specific compensatory strengths. Most people in this group find standard treatment approaches relatively more accessible, though individual variation remains significant. 3.2 The substance connection. Why the warrior seeks quiet and the warrior seeks fuel. Genotype. Substance vulnerability pattern. Warrior, Val/Val, fast clearance. Stimulants: cocaine, methamphetamine, high-dose caffeine, prescription stimulants. These compensate for fast clearance by flooding the system faster than it can drain, providing the dopamine level that makes ordinary function feel engaging rather than flat. Worrier: met/met, slow clearance. Depressants: alcohol, benzodiazepines, opioids. These slow the accumulating neurochemical traffic, providing the quiet that a brain running on inadequate clearance capacity is perpetually seeking. Balanced: val/met. Variable, context, and stress load are primary determinants, may develop either pattern depending on life circumstances and the presence of additional genetic vulnerabilities. MTHFR, CYP 450. 3.3 COMT matched recovery protocols for each profile. The Warrior Recovery Protocol, supporting fast clearance. For the warrior, the therapeutic challenge is providing adequate stimulation and reward without the substance. The neurochemical deficit is real. Recovery requires addressing it, not simply removing the substance and hoping the brain adjusts. L-tyrosine 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams on an empty stomach in the morning. Dopamine precursor. Supports baseline dopamine production. Quercetin 500 milligrams twice daily. Natural COMT inhibitor. Slows clearance slightly, extending dopamine availability. Mucuna pruriens 200 to 400 milligrams. Natural source of L-dopa, the immediate dopamine precursor. High-intensity exercise 5 times weekly. The most powerful natural dopamine stimulus available. CrossFit, sprinting, martial arts, competitive lifting. Structure and novelty in work and recreation, the warrior brain requires engagement. Boredom is a relapse risk that should be treated as seriously as any pharmacological trigger. The Warrior Recovery Protocol, calming the accumulated signal. For the warrior, the therapeutic challenge is providing adequate calm without the substance. The anxiety that drove use was genuine. Recovery requires addressing the neurochemical reality of slow clearance. Magnesium glycinate 600 to 800 milligrams daily. GABA support, calming without sedation. Essential foundation for the Warrior Protocol. L-theanine 400 milligrams twice daily. Increases alpha brainwave activity. Produces calm without drowsiness. Synergizes with magnesium. Same 800 milligrams daily. Provides methyl groups that support COMT function. Helps the enzyme work more efficiently. Taurine 1000 milligrams daily. GABA mimetic calming effects. Particularly useful during acute stress periods. Low stimulation environment design. For the warrior, the environment is not a soft preference. It is a medical intervention. Remote work, reduced noise, predictable routines, limited high-stakes social obligations are genuine therapeutic modifications. 3.4. The COMT-MTHFR intersection, when both systems are compromised. The most treatment-resistant addiction profiles typically involve variants in both MTHFR and COMT simultaneously. The interactions between these two systems are not additive. They are multiplicative. Combined profile. What the experience looks like. MTHFR-T/T plus COMT, met/met, depleted warrior. Chronic low-grade depression from neurotransmitter deficit, MTHFR, combined with inability to clear stress surges, COMT. Under stress, catastrophic overwhelm, racing thoughts that will not stop, severe anxiety and depression simultaneously. When substances worked, they felt absolutely necessary, not recreational. Rapid progression to dependence, severe withdrawal, very high relapse rates without genetically targeted treatment. MTHFR-T/T plus COMT, val/val, understimulated warrior. Low baseline neurotransmitter production, MTHFR, meets rapid dopamine clearance, COMT, chronic low motivation, difficulty sustaining focus, anhedonia, restlessness, boredom. When stimulants worked, they produced something like normal function for the first time. High dose requirements to overcome the double deficit. Rapid tolerance development. Severe crashes. Key takeaways. Chapters 1 through 3. Addiction is a biological survival adaptation, not a moral failing. The brain followed its own rational calculation. Understanding this changes the question from why am I weak to what does my system need? MTHFR variants affect 40 to 60% of the population. If standard antidepressants have not worked for you, if substances made you feel normal rather than high, this is likely involved. COMT variants determine your stress clearance speed. Warriors need adequate stimulation. Worriers need adequate calm. Both needs are real and addressable. The supplement protocols in this chapter are not optional additions. For people with these variants, they are the biological foundation without which behavioral interventions cannot hold. Synthetic folic acid actively worsens MTHFR impairment. Check every label. Replace with methylfolate. Start the methylation protocol slowly. The brain needs time to recalibrate to new neurochemical levels. Overmethylation symptoms are real and manageable if you titrate carefully. Chapter 4. The Processing System. Your CYP450 genes and the speed of drug metabolism. The Architect's Log. Every drug that enters your body, a prescription or otherwise, must be processed by your liver before it can be cleared. The enzyme family responsible for most of this processing is CYP450, cytochrome P450. This family of enzymes is not a single system. It is a collection of specialized processors, each handling specific drug classes, each with its own genetic variant that determines processing speed. Your CYP450 status can transform a normal dose of medication into something ineffective or into something lethal. This is not hyperbole, it is pharmacology. And it is one of the most consequential pieces of biological information a person with a history of substance use can possess, because it determines not only how prescription medications behave in your body, but how illicit substances behave, and why the drug that killed someone else at a modest dose might barely touch you, or why the dose that barely touched someone else puts you in the emergency room. 4.1. The CYP2D6 enzyme, the one that matters most for opioids and antidepressants. CYP2D6 is the most clinically significant enzyme in this family for people with substance use histories. It processes the majority of opioid analgesics, many antidepressants, and several other psychiatric medications. The FDA has identified CYP2D6 status as clinically actionable for more than 60 medications, meaning your status should, in principle, influence prescribing decisions before the prescription is written. Phenotype. Frequency. What happens? Clinical consequence. Poor metabolizer, PM. 5 to 10% Caucasian, 1 to 2% Asian. Drug accumulates, cannot complete metabolic conversion for prodrugs. Codeine/tramadol, no pain relief. Dangerous side effects. May be labeled drug-seeking when experiencing therapeutic failure. Fentanyl, full effect, full danger. Intermediate metabolizer, IM. 10 to 15% of population. Reduced but not absent enzyme function. Dose adjustment often required. May need alternatives to prodrugs. Normal metabolizer, NM. 65 to 80% of population. Standard processing speed. Standard dosing designed for this group applies. Ultra-rapid metabolizer, UM. 1 to 10% higher in North African Ethiopian populations. Drug clears too fast for therapeutic effect at standard doses. Prodrugs convert dangerously fast. Codeine/tramadol, potentially fatal, converts to active form faster than the body can handle. Standard antidepressant doses ineffective. The prodrug problem. Why codeine is not the safe option. Codeine is a prodrug. It has no direct pain-relieving activity in the form prescribed. It must be converted by CYP2D6 into morphine to produce its effect. This single fact has life-or-death implications across both ends of the metabolizer spectrum. For poor metabolizers, CYP2D6 cannot perform the conversion efficiently. Codeine accumulates in its inactive form, producing side effects: constipation, nausea, sedation, without pain relief. The person reports no pain relief and asks for something stronger. The prescriber, lacking pharmacogenomic context, may interpret this as drug-seeking. The patient's actual problem, therapeutic failure due to a genetic variant, goes unaddressed. For ultra-rapid metabolizers, CYP2, D6 performs the conversion extraordinarily fast, generating morphine faster than the body's protective systems can manage. Respiratory depression can occur at doses that would be entirely safe for a normal metabolizer. There are documented fatalities in children and nursing infants of mothers who were prescribed codeine for routine post-surgical pain management. Fentanyl bypasses CYP2D6 entirely. This is why fentanyl at any given dose behaves more predictably across metabolizer statuses, and why it is simultaneously so dangerous in the illicit supply, where a dose calibrated for one person cannot be safely extrapolated to another. CYP2D6 status is irrelevant to fentanyl's potency. Every variant gets the full effect. 4.2 CYP3A4, the other major processor, benzodiazepines, fentanyl, and drug-drug interactions. CYP3A4 processes approximately half of all drugs in clinical use, including fentanyl, most benzodiazepines, and many HIV antiretrovirals. Its clinical significance is less about individual genetic variants and more about what happens when multiple CYP3A4 substrates are present simultaneously. The substrate collision problem. When two or more drugs compete for the same enzyme, they interfere with each other's metabolism. The enzyme can only process one substrate at a time. If it is occupied processing drug A, drug B accumulates unprocessed. The accumulation continues until drug A is cleared, at which point drug B may have reached levels far beyond its intended therapeutic window. Elvis Presley had 14 different drugs in his system at autopsy. Heath Ledger had 6. Philip Seymour Hoffman had 4. In each case, the question is not which drug killed them. It is what happened to all of those drugs when they all arrived at the same metabolic checkpoint simultaneously and the checkpoint became overwhelmed. Substrate collision is not exotic pharmacology. It is what happens when more drugs enter the body than the liver's enzymatic capacity can process in the necessary time frame. The rule that follows from this: every new drug or supplement added to a regimen changes the behavior of every other drug already in that regimen. This applies to prescription medications and illicit substances equally. Checking interactions before adding anything is not overcaution. It is basic pharmacological literacy. 4.3 The Street Drug Reality: How CYP450 Status Shapes Illicit Substance Experience. The CYP450 consequences extend well beyond prescription medication. The same genetic variants that determine how your body processes oxycodone determine how it processes heroin. The same variants that affect antidepressant metabolism affect MDMA metabolism. Illicit substances do not bypass pharmacogenomics. They simply introduce the additional hazard of unknown purity and unknown dose into an already genetically variable system. The fentanyl supply crisis through a pharmacogenomic lens. The contamination of the illicit drug supply with fentanyl, now present in substances across categories, including stimulants and benzodiazepines, creates a specific danger for individuals with CYP2D6 poor metabolizer status. The opioids those individuals were previously using may have provided inadequate relief due to their PM status, driving them towards stronger alternatives. Fentanyl, which bypasses CYP2D6, provides full effect regardless of metabolizer status. There is no less potent version for the PM. The current crisis cannot be understood or addressed without engaging with pharmacogenomic reality. A person seeking adequate pain relief from a supply chain that is producing inadequate response due to their genetic status is not a person with a character problem. They are a person navigating a system that was never designed for their biology and dying for it. Narcan, naloxone, should be available and proximate to anyone using substances from an unregulated supply, regardless of their substance or their self-assessment of their tolerance. Carry it. Learn to use it. The dose that was safe last month may not be the same substance this month. 4.4 Identifying your status. Testing and practical safety. The testing hierarchy, from free to comprehensive. Tier 1, free or low cost. 23andMe or Ancestry DNA, $99 to $199. Provides raw genetic data that includes CYP450 variants. Upload to Genetic Genie, free, or Stratigene, $40 for interpretation. Homocysteine blood test, $30 to $80, often insurance covered. Indirect marker 4. Methylation status, request from any physician. Tier 2, clinical testing, $300 to $2,000. GeneSight, comprehensive psychiatric and pain medication pharmacogenomic panel, often covered by insurance for treatment-resistant conditions. Cost approximately $330 self-pay. GenoMind, broader panel including neuroscience-specific variants. Similarly structured coverage, OneOme or Tempus, comprehensive precision medicine panels including drug metabolism across all major drug classes. What clinical pharmacogenomic testing tells you, which medications are likely to work for your specific genotype, which require dose adjustment, which should be avoided entirely, and the specific drug-drug interaction risks based on your metabolizer profile. This information should precede prescription of any psychoactive or analgesic medication. That it usually does not is one of the central failures this book documents. The wallet card. Carry this information. Create a physical card with your metabolizer status and carry it. When any new prescriber, dentist, anesthesiologist, or emergency physician asks about medications or allergies, your pharmacogenomic status should be part of that conversation. The information should be immediately available rather than recalled under stress. Front, name, emergency contact, primary CYP2D6 status, PM/IM/NM/UM, specific drugs to avoid. For example, CYP2D6 poor metabolizer. Avoid codeine, tramadol, certain antidepressants. Back, additional CYP variants if known, MTHFR, and COMT status, current medications, known drug allergies. Free interaction checking tools, drugs.com. Interaction checker, Medscape drug interaction checker. Check every new addition to your regimen before taking it, every time. This habit costs nothing and has a documented history of saving lives. Chapter 5, When Systems Collide. The combined effect of multiple genetic variants.
The Architect's Log. The previous 3 chapters have described 3 independent genetic systems as if they operate in isolation. They do not. MTHFR determines the volume of your neurotransmitter supply. COMT determines how efficiently that supply is cleared after use. CYP450 determines how your body processes anything you take to address the imbalances the first 2 systems create. When variants exist across all 3 simultaneously, the vulnerabilities do not simply add, they multiply. This multiplicative interaction is the neurogenomic explanation for why addiction appears to run in families, not through the inheritance of addictive personality as a character trait, but through the inheritance of specific genetic variant combinations that create specific neurochemical vulnerabilities. The biology clusters. The vulnerability is real, and it is addressable in ways that character-based frameworks never could be.
5.1 The 3 high-risk combinations, profiles that create extreme vulnerability. Profile 1, the depleted worrier, MTHFR-T/T plus COMT, MET/MET. Genetic architecture, low baseline neurotransmitter production, MTHFR, combined with slow clearance of stress chemicals, COMT. The neurochemical reality. The production line runs at 30% capacity, and the cleanup crew works at minimum speed. Baseline state. Chronic low-grade depression from perpetual neurotransmitter deficit. Excellent cognitive function in calm environments. High intelligence that often masked the underlying biological struggle for years. Under stress, the slow clearance means stress chemicals accumulate rapidly. Anxiety becomes overwhelming before the chemistry can drain. Depression and anxiety occur simultaneously in ways that each amplify the other. The substance experience. The depleted warrior typically describes their first encounter with opioids, benzodiazepines, or alcohol, not as euphoria, but as relief, as the first experience of adequate neurochemistry, of a brain that is finally quiet enough to think and calm enough to function. The substance addresses both deficits simultaneously. It boosts depleted dopamine while slowing the accumulated stress signal. Recovery without addressing both underlying deficits is asking the person to return to a neurochemical state they experienced as genuinely intolerable. The treatment protocol for this profile: L-methylfolate 15 mg, MTHFR bypass, magnesium glycinate 800 mg, COMT support and calming, SAMe 800 mg, methyl groups for both pathways, L-theanine 400 mg twice daily, environmental redesign toward calm and predictability. Without this foundation, behavioral interventions consistently fail to hold. Profile 2. The understimulated warrior, MTHFR-T/T plus COMT val/val. Genetic architecture: low baseline neurotransmitter production, MTHFR, combined with rapid dopamine clearance, COMT. The neurochemical reality: production is limited and what is produced is cleared before it can accumulate to meaningful levels. Baseline state: chronic low motivation and energy. Difficulty sustaining focus despite genuine effort. Anhedonia: the flat effect that comes not from depression but from genuine reward system underperformance. Restlessness and boredom that can seem like character flaws but are receptor-level realities. The understimulated warrior is often functional, sometimes highly functional under pressure, but experiences ordinary life as genuinely dull in a way they cannot fully explain. The substance experience: stimulants, cocaine, methamphetamine, prescription amphetamines, provide both the production boost, MTHFR bypass, and the clearance compensation, enough supply to remain meaningful despite fast clearance. The understimulated warrior often describes stimulants as enabling them to feel like the person they were supposed to be: focused, motivated, engaged. Recovery requires providing these neurochemical states through other means. The treatment protocol: L-methylfolate 7.5 mg, L-tyrosine 1,500 mg twice daily on empty stomach, quercetin 500 mg twice daily, natural COMT modulation. Mucuna pruriens 200 mg, high-intensity exercise 5 times weekly as the primary natural dopamine intervention. Consider Wellbutrin as a non-addictive pharmacological bridge with prescriber. Profile 3. The metabolic mismatch: CYP2D6PM or UM plus MTHFR/COMT variants. Genetic architecture: a CYP450 metabolizer variant that makes standard prescription medications either ineffective, PM cannot convert prodrugs, or insufficient, UM clears standard doses before they reach therapeutic levels, combined with MTHFR and / or COMT variants that create genuine neurochemical need. The clinical pattern: the person presents with genuine pain or psychiatric distress. Standard prescriptions are tried. They fail to provide adequate relief due to metabolizer status. The person seeks alternatives in the illicit market. The clinical system interprets this as drug seeking behavior rather than therapeutic failure. The person is labeled, and the underlying biological mismatch goes unaddressed. This profile describes a significant proportion of people who end up with illicit opioid use disorder following prescription opioid exposure. The prescription failed pharmacogenomically. The illicit market provided what the prescription could not. The solution was always a different prescription, one matched to the actual metabolizer status, not a character intervention. In the current fentanyl supply environment, metabolic mismatch profiles carry extreme overdose risk. The fentanyl in the unregulated supply bypasses CYP2D6 entirely, meaning the dose calibration assumptions that protected PM individuals from prior opioid overdose no longer apply. This is a medical emergency at a population level. 5.2 additional genetic layers, OPRM1 and DRD2. The receptor variants, beyond production and clearance. OPRM1A118G, the opioid receptor gene. The OPRM1 gene encodes the mu opioid receptor, the primary receptor through which opioids produce both their therapeutic and their addictive effects. The A118G polymorphism alters receptor sensitivity. G allele carriers, AG or GG genotype, require higher opioid doses to achieve equivalent analgesia and also show better response to naltrexone, a finding with direct clinical application in medication-assisted recovery. When OPRM1 variants combine with MTHFR, COMT, and CYP2D6 variants, the result is a multi-system genetic vulnerability profile with extremely high treatment complexity. DRD2 TAC1A, the reward deficiency variant. The DRD2 gene encodes the dopamine D2 receptor. The TAC1AA1 allele is associated with approximately 30% reduced D2 receptor density, meaning the receiving end of dopamine signaling is structurally less sensitive. Individuals carrying A1 variants experience reward deficiency at the receptor level, regardless of how much dopamine is produced or how well it is cleared. This is reward deficiency syndrome, a state in which the biological machinery for experiencing ordinary reward is impaired from both the supply side, MTHFR, the clearance side, COMT, and now the receptor side, DRD2. When DRD2A1 combines with MTHFR-T/T and COMT-Val/Val, the result is one of the highest risk neurogenomic profiles for both substance use disorder and treatment resistance. Multi-substance polyaddiction, early onset, and poor outcomes with standard treatment are characteristic. Comprehensive dopamine support, addressing production, clearance, and receptor density, is required alongside intensive behavioral support. 5.3 The three-phase recovery protocol restoration, taper redesign. Phase 1. Baseline restoration, months 1 through 3. The biological foundation must be built before the behavioral work can hold. Phase 1 is not a preliminary step. It is the primary intervention. Without neurochemical restoration, the most committed behavioral effort will fail against a system that is biochemically primed to relapse. Methylation support, MTHFR. L-methylfolate. Begin at 1 mg, titrate to 7.5 to 15 mg over 8 weeks. Methylcobalamin, 5,000 micrograms sublingual daily. TMG, 1,000 mg daily. P5P, active B6, 50 mg daily. Dopamine support, profile dependent. Warrior/understimulated, L-tyrosine 1,000 to 2,000 mg daily. Mucuna pruriens 200 to 400 mg. Warrior/depleted, L-theanine 400 mg twice daily. Avoid stimulating supplements. COMT support. All profiles, magnesium glycinate, 400 to 800 mg daily, essential foundation for both types. Warrior profile additionally, same 800 mg daily. Taurine 1,000 mg daily, lithium orotate 10 mg if indicated. Warrior profile additionally, quercetin 500 mg twice daily, green tea extract 400 mg. Inflammation reduction, all profiles, omega-3s, EPA/DHA, 2 to 3 grams daily. Curcumin, 1,000 mg daily with piperine for absorption. NAC, N-acetylcysteine, 1,200 mg daily. Glutathione precursor. Also reduces cravings, as documented in clinical trials. Phase 2, substance taper with biological support, months 3 through 6. Substance reduction without neurochemical support fails because it removes the only thing currently providing adequate neurochemistry without replacing it. Phase 2 begins taper only after Phase 1 foundation is established and showing measurable effect. If using opioids, consider buprenorphine, Suboxone if appropriate. Discuss with a prescriber experienced in MAT. Slow taper, 5 to 10% reduction every 1 to 2 weeks, never faster. The biology needs time. Add DLPA, D/L phenylalanine. 500 milligrams twice daily reduces withdrawal discomfort through endorphin support. Add black seed oil 1,000 milligrams twice daily. Has documented evidence for tolerance reduction. Maintain all Phase 1 supplements throughout. If using stimulants, consider Wellbutrin as a bridge with prescriber. Non-addictive, supports dopamine. Slow stimulant reduction with L-tyrosine increased to 2,000 milligrams twice daily during taper. High-intensity exercise protocol begins now. This is not optional for warriors. It is pharmacological. If using alcohol or benzodiazepines, critical. Medical supervision required alcohol and benzodiazepine withdrawal can cause seizures and death. Never taper these substances without medical supervision. Medical detox is often the appropriate first step. After medical stabilization, the Phase 1 and Phase 2 protocols apply. GABA support during and after taper. L-theanine, taurine, magnesium glycinate, glycine. These support the GABA system that has been pharmacologically suppressed. Baclofen or gabapentin may be appropriate bridge medications with prescriber guidance. Phase 3, Environmental and Behavioral Redesign, months 6 through 12. With neurochemistry partially restored and substances reduced or eliminated, the work of building a life that supports the specific genetic architecture begins. This is not generic recovery work. It is genotype-specific life design. For depleted warriors, calm, predictable physical environment. This is a therapeutic prescription, not a preference. Remote work or quiet workplace whenever possible. Noise and social pressure have documented cortisol effects for slow COMT individuals. Daily breathwork or meditation, the most consistently effective non-pharmacological COMT support. Therapy focusing on anxiety management, ACT, and mindfulness-based approaches are particularly well-matched for understimulated warriors. Dynamic, challenging work with measurable outcomes. The warrior brain requires stakes. Regular, intense physical training. Replace the neurochemical function of the substance. Novelty and structured adventure. Not chaos, but deliberate new experiences that provide dopamine without risk. Therapy focusing on structure and follow-through. CBT with concrete goal setting. 5.4 The Family Factor, Inherited Vulnerability and Breaking the Cycle. Why addiction runs in families. The biological reality. When someone asks why addiction appears in multiple generations of the same family, the genetic framework provides an answer that is more precise and more useful than bad environment or learned behavior, though those factors are real and compound the genetic foundation. MTHFR, COMT, CYP450, OPRM1, and DRD2 variants are all heritable. If you carry MTHFR-T/T and COMT-MET/MET, your children have a meaningful probability of inheriting each of those variants. If they inherit both, they begin life with the same neurochemical architecture that drove your vulnerability, without necessarily having any of the life circumstances that might signal risk to a standard clinical assessment. The conversation worth having with at-risk family members is not "be careful, addiction runs in our family" as a moral caution. It is, I have specific genetic information that is relevant to you. That information can be tested. The variants can be identified before they drive someone towards substances as a solution to neurochemical pain they do not yet have a name for. The testing costs less than a single month of serious use. The knowledge changes everything. Part 2 The Evidence. 60 years of preventable deaths, a forensic record. A note on what follows. The deaths documented in this section are not cautionary tales about excess. They are not stories about what happens when talent meets weakness. They are case studies in systematic diagnostic failure. 60 years of people dying from conditions that pharmacogenomic testing, had it been available and applied, could have identified, understood, and in many cases addressed. These were not weak people. They were not people who lacked resources, access, or motivation to recover. They were people who were given the wrong diagnosis, the wrong medication, or no medication at all, and who turned to unregulated substances to address genuine neurochemical needs that the clinical system failed to meet. They were people whose prescribers did not know their CYP450 status when writing opioid prescriptions. People whose tolerance reset after detox was never factored into discharge planning. People whose anxiety was severe enough to be medically disabling, but whose COMT status was never tested. The genetic hypotheses offered for each person are analytical, not confirmed diagnoses. Genetic testing was not performed on these individuals during their lifetimes in the manner documented here. The hypotheses are built from documented clinical patterns, known pharmacological facts, and the genetic research that has emerged in the decades since these deaths. They are offered not as definitive statements, but as illustrations of what the pharmacogenomic framework can illuminate when applied retrospectively to documented patterns of drug response and failure. Read these not as tragedy, but as evidence. The patterns repeat. The interventions that could have changed them exist now. They existed, some of them, when these people were still alive. 6.1 The Golden Era, 1962 to 1978, the original diagnostic failures. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Marilyn Monroe, 1926 to 1962. Failure mode, the original prescription tragedy. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Acute barbiturate poisoning, nembutal and chloral hydrate. Probable suicide. Substances involved. Multiple barbiturate prescriptions from multiple physicians. No coordinating prescriber. Genetic hypothesis illustrative. CYP2C19. Poor metabolizer, barbiturates have an extremely narrow therapeutic window. PM status means accumulation to toxic levels at doses designed for a normal metabolizer. System failure analysis. Marilyn was prescribed barbiturates by multiple physicians who did not communicate with one another. Her documented insomnia and persistent anxiety suggest possible COMT, MET/MET status, a slow clearance worrier profile seeking pharmaceutical quiet for a brain that could not quiet itself. CYP2C19 variants dramatically affect barbiturate metabolism. A poor metabolizer accumulates to toxic levels at doses calibrated for a normal metabolizer. The combination of uncoordinated prescribing, an extremely narrow window drug class, and probable metabolizer status created a system with no safety margin. What could have changed? This coordinated prescribing and CYP2C19 testing before barbiturate prescription. Understanding that insomnia and anxiety that do not respond to standard approaches often have a neurochemical substrate that needs to be identified, not medicated around. She was 36. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Elvis Presley, 1935 to 1977. Failure mode. The polypharmacy collapse. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Cardiac arrhythmia with 14 drugs identified in the system at autopsy. Substances involved: opioids, benzodiazepines, barbiturates, stimulants, antihistamines. Simultaneously prescribed by a personal physician with insufficient oversight. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. CYP450 substrate collision. Every major metabolic enzyme pathway simultaneously saturated. Cardiac disease as additional vulnerability. System failure analysis. 14 drugs competing for a finite pool of metabolic enzymes means that none of them is being cleared at its intended rate. Everything accumulates. The drug that should have cleared in 4 hours clears in 16 because the enzyme needed to process it is occupied with drug number 7. His documented enlarged heart, cardiomyopathy, meant the accumulated pharmacological load was being delivered to a cardiovascular system with already reduced reserve. There was no single drug that killed Elvis Presley. It was the catastrophic interaction of everything taken together by a system with inadequate metabolic capacity to handle the combined substrate load. What could have changed this? Any pharmacogenomically informed prescriber reviewing his medication list would have flagged the collision. The intervention was not sophisticated. It was standard pharmacological practice applied before rather than after the crisis. He was 42. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Jimi Hendrix, 1942 to 1970. Failure mode. The wrong prescription, the wrong dose. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Asphyxia from vomit, aspiration following barbiturate intoxication. Substances involved. Vesparax, barbiturate sleeping pills belonging to someone else, combined with alcohol. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. CNS, depression stack. Impaired gag and cough reflex from synergistic suppression. System failure analysis. Jimmy took his girlfriend's sleeping pills. Not his own prescription. Not calibrated to his own metabolism. Barbiturates plus alcohol do not produce a combined sedation equal to their sum. They produce synergistic CNS depression. Each one enhances the other's effect at the receptor level. The gag reflex, the cough reflex, and the airway protective mechanisms all depend on brainstem circuits that were suppressed by the combination. He vomited. He could not protect his airway. His lungs filled. What could have changed this understanding that barbiturate and alcohol synergy is lethal, not merely additive? Understanding that taking another person's prescription medication bypasses whatever metabolic calibration was done for that prescription. Understanding that I've taken this amount before and been fine applies only to your specific substance history, not to someone else's prescription. He was 27. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Janis Joplin, 1943 to 1970. Failure mode, the purity gamble. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Heroin overdose. Probable alcohol contribution. Substances involved. Heroin of unusually high purity, a batch that was circulating in Los Angeles at the time. Alcohol. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. OPRM1, variants affecting opioid receptor sensitivity. Tolerance calibrated to standard street purity, not the high purity batch. System failure analysis. Janis Joplin's death illustrates the fundamental pharmacological danger of an unregulated supply. You cannot know what you are dosing. Her tolerance had been established through months of use at a particular purity level. The batch she used that night was substantially stronger. Her tolerance was a measurement of what her opioid receptors could handle at the purity she expected. The purity changed. The tolerance did not. The gap between what she expected to receive and what she received was lethal. What could have changed this? Drug checking services, which exist today and were not available in 1970, allow the purity of a substance to be tested before use. Harm reduction education about the tolerance implications of purity variation. understanding that every batch from an unregulated supply is a new pharmacological unknown. She was 27. 6.2. The Rock Era 1978 to 1997, Patterns that Repeat. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file. Keith Moon, 1946 to 1978. Failure mode. The ironic prescription. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Overdose of heminevrin, clemethazole, prescribed specifically for alcohol withdrawal management. Substances involved. 32 heminevrin tablets taken over the course of a day. Alcohol consumption at a party the same evening. Genetic hypothesis. Illustrative. Narrow therapeutic window medication combined with active alcohol consumption. Probable CYP enzyme competition. System failure analysis. Keith Moon was attempting to get sober. The heminevrin was prescribed precisely for that purpose, to ease the neurological distress of alcohol withdrawal. But heminevrin has an extremely narrow therapeutic window, and its combination with alcohol is directly contraindicated. The medication designed to help him stop drinking, taken on a day when he also drank, became the mechanism of his death. The tragedy is doubled. The intervention was appropriate. The monitoring was not. What could have changed? This supervised inpatient medical detox rather than outpatient medication management for someone with documented severe alcohol use disorder. The medication was correct. The setting was wrong. He was 32. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, John Belushi, 1949 to 1982. Failure mode, the original speedball. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Combined cocaine and heroin intoxication. Injected. Substances involved in cocaine and heroin simultaneously injected. Genetic hypothesis. Illustrative. Pharmacokinetic mismatch. Cocaine and heroin have different half-lives and affect overlapping cardiovascular and respiratory systems through opposing mechanisms. System failure analysis. The speedball myth is that stimulant and depressant cancel each other out. That the combination produces something balanced. It does not. Cocaine produces intense cardiovascular stimulation and respiratory acceleration. Heroin produces cardiovascular depression and respiratory slowing. These are not canceling forces. They are competing forces acting on the same system simultaneously, creating unpredictable stress on the heart and brainstem. Cocaine clears faster than heroin. When the cocaine effect wanes, the respiratory depression continues, now without the partial compensation the stimulant was providing. The heart, already stressed by cocaine, cannot manage the transition. What could have changed this? Understanding speedball pharmacokinetics as a fundamental harm reduction fact, the combination is not more dangerous because of dose. It is more dangerous because of mechanism. He was 33. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, River Phoenix, 1970 to 1993. Failure mode, the witness problem. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Acute combined drug intoxication, cocaine and heroin. Substances involved. Persian brown heroin and cocaine, snorted, at a public venue with witnesses. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. Same mechanism as Belushi, pharmacokinetic mismatch, bystander naloxone absence. System failure analysis, River Phoenix seized and died in front of witnesses who did not recognize the signs of opioid overdose and did not have naloxone available. By the time emergency services arrived, the window for intervention had closed. The pharmacological mechanism was identical to Belushi's death 11 years earlier. The difference? and there was no meaningful difference, was the venue. A public space with witnesses is not inherently safer than a private space without them, because witnesses who do not recognize an overdose and do not have the means to reverse it are not functionally different from absence. What could have changed this? Bystander naloxone availability and training. Overdose recognition education. The particular appearance of opioid overdose, distinguishing it from intoxication or sleep, is a teachable skill. He was 23. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Chris Farley, 1964 to 1997. Failure mode, the pattern that would not break. Clinical record, detail. Official cause of death, speedball overdose. Cocaine and morphine. Substances involved: cocaine and morphine, documented cardiac disease, severe obesity. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. Same pharmacokinetic mechanism as Belushi, whose death Farley had studied. Additional cardiac vulnerability from atherosclerosis. System failure analysis. Chris Farley's death was, in certain clinical respects, a near-exact repetition of John Belushi's 15 years earlier. He was aware of how Belushi died. He had sought treatment multiple times. The mechanism that killed him was the same mechanism he had known about, from the same combination. This is not evidence of weak will. It is evidence of what happens when a biological drive for relief encounters an inadequate treatment system, and knowledge alone, without neurochemical support, is asked to override the compulsion. His documented cardiac disease meant the cardiovascular stress of the combination had even less reserve to work against. What could have changed? This understanding that knowing the danger is not sufficient to overcome the neurochemical drive. Treating the underlying neurochemical deficit, identifying his genetic profile and providing biological support, rather than relying on behavioral commitment to override biology. He was 33. 6.3. The Modern Era, 1997 to 2023. When the system should have learned. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Whitney Houston, 1963 to 2012. Failure mode, the anxiety cascade. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death: drowning with contributing factors, cocaine, atherosclerotic heart disease, and alprazolam, Xanax. Substances involved: cocaine combined with alprazolam, hot water bath, underlying cardiac disease. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. Probable COMT met/met status. Cocaine is exceptionally anxiety-provoking for slow-clearance individuals. Benzodiazepine use as self-medication of cocaine-induced anxiety, cardiovascular stress from the combination in hot water. System failure analysis. Whitney Houston's documented pattern of cocaine use combined with benzodiazepines is characteristic of a specific profile. The worrier who uses stimulants for function, but requires depressants to manage the anxiety the stimulants generate. For COMT met/met individuals, cocaine does not produce the euphoric stimulation it might in a worrier. It produces intense, overwhelming anxiety that becomes its own emergency. The benzodiazepine was addressing the anxiety the cocaine caused. The cocaine was addressing something else, possibly the neurochemical flatness of her depleted dopamine system in periods of stress. The combination in a hot bath, which further stresses the cardiovascular system, removed what little safety margin existed. What could have changed this? COMT testing before any stimulant use or prescription. Understanding that cocaine-induced anxiety in certain individuals is not incidental. It is pharmacogenomically predictable, treating the underlying anxiety profile with matched interventions rather than allowing a self-medication cascade to develop. She was 48. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Prince, 1958 to 2016. Failure mode, the CYP2D6 time bomb. Clinical record, detail. Official cause of death, fentanyl overdose, found in counterfeit Vicodin pills. Substances involved. Fentanyl in pills he believed to be Vicodin. Chronic hip pain requiring ongoing management. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. Probable CYP2D6, poor metabolizer. Standard opioids, ineffective or inadequate, drove toward alternatives including unregulated supply. System failure analysis. Prince had documented chronic hip pain that required ongoing analgesic management. If he carried CYP2D6 poor metabolizer status, and the pattern of his reported drug history is consistent with this hypothesis, standard opioid analgesics prescribed in his treatment history would have provided inadequate relief. Codeine, tramadol, and hydrocodone all require CYP2D6 activation to achieve full effect. A poor metabolizer gets the side effects of these drugs without their analgesic benefit. The search for something that works against untreated pain drives people toward alternatives. Fentanyl bypasses CYP2D6 entirely. It works at full potency regardless of metabolizer status. The counterfeit supply carries unpredictable fentanyl concentrations. The combination of unaddressed metabolizer status, legitimate chronic pain, and an unregulated supply created a system with no safety margin. What could have changed? This ACYP2D6 test, costing approximately $200, would have identified his metabolizer status and guided opioid selection, away from prodrugs toward direct-acting agents at appropriate doses. His pain could have been managed. The path to the counterfeit supply would not have existed. He was 57. Warning sign. Illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file. Amy Winehouse, 1983 to 2011. Failure mode. The tolerance reset. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Accidental alcohol poisoning. Blood alcohol concentration of 0.416%. Substances involved. Alcohol after a period of abstinence. Tolerance dramatically reduced from prior weeks of sobriety. Genetic hypothesis. Illustrative. ADH1B/ALDH2 variants affecting alcohol metabolism. Post-abstinence tolerance reset to near zero, while craving and consumption patterns retained memory of prior tolerance levels. System failure analysis. Amy Winehouse had been attempting to moderate or stop her alcohol use in the weeks before her death. Abstinence resets physiological tolerance. The receptor adaptations that allow the body to function at high blood alcohol levels gradually normalize during sobriety. Craving and behavioral patterns do not reset on the same timeline. When she drank on the night of her death, she consumed at a level her prior tolerance could have managed. Her current tolerance could not. A blood alcohol concentration of 0.416% is more than 5 times the legal driving limit and is lethal for most people. There was no intent to overdose. There was a catastrophic gap between what her body previously tolerated and what it could tolerate following the abstinence period. What could have changed this? Explicit education about tolerance reset as one of the most dangerous post-sobriety periods. Naltrexone, which can be selected based on OPRM1 status for craving management during recovery. Understanding that the week following any period of abstinence carries elevated overdose risk that requires specific management, not less attention. She was 27. Warning sign illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file. Heath Ledger, 1979 to 2008. Failure mode. The polypharmacy pileup. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death: acute intoxication from the combination of oxycodone, hydrocodone, diazepam, temazepam, alprazolam, and doxylamine. Substances involved: 6 prescription medications prescribed by multiple physicians, no coordinating oversight. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. CYP4, 50 substrate collision across CYP3A4 and CYP2D6, all 6 drugs competing for the same enzymatic processing capacity. System failure analysis. Heath Ledger's death is a textbook illustration of substrate collision. Every drug in his system was processed by one or more of the same CYP450 enzymes. Each drug slows the clearance of all the others by competing for the same processing pathway. When 6 drugs compete simultaneously, clearance times multiply. Everything accumulates. The CNS depression from the benzodiazepines combined with the respiratory depression from the opioids in the context of accumulated drug levels that exceeded any of the prescriber's individual calculations. What could have changed? Any pharmacogenomically aware prescriber, reviewing the full medication list rather than only their own prescription, would have identified the collision. The intervention required was not sophisticated, it was coordination. Medical records that travel with the patient rather than staying with individual prescribers. Automatic interaction, flagging before prescription dispensing. He was 28. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file, Philip Seymour Hoffman, 1967 to 2014. Failure mode, 23 years, then the tolerance reset. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death: mixed intoxication, heroin, cocaine, benzodiazepines, amphetamines. Substances involved: multiple substances. Over 50 bags of heroin found in the apartment. 23 years of prior sobriety. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. Post-sobriety tolerance reset, combined with probable underlying neurogenomic profile that drove the original addiction and the relapse. The biological deficit that drove use in the first place was never fully resolved. System failure analysis. Philip Seymour Hoffman had been sober for 23 years. 23 years of sobriety resets physiological tolerance as completely as 23 weeks. His opioid receptors, having not been exposed to opioids for over 2 decades, had no tolerance at all. The doses he used, calibrated apparently to what he had used before or to what a current daily user would use, were lethal at his actual current tolerance level. More fundamentally, something drove him to relapse after 23 years. The neurochemical deficit that made opioids necessary the first time does not disappear through abstinence. Without identifying and addressing that deficit, abstinence is always one crisis away from relapse. What could have changed this? Understanding and treating the underlying neurogenomic profile that drove the original addiction. Ensuring that long-term recovery includes ongoing biological support, not just behavioral maintenance. Explicit relapse planning that acknowledges the catastrophic danger of the immediate post-relapse period and provides Narcan access and emergency protocols. He was 46. Warning sign, illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file. Matthew Perry, 1969 to 2023. Failure mode. The therapeutic ketamine tragedy. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death: acute ketamine effects with drowning. Contributing: coronary artery disease, buprenorphine. Substances involved: ketamine, received as therapeutic infusions. Hot tub, underlying cardiac disease, buprenorphine. Genetic hypothesis, illustrative. CYP3A4/CYP2B6 status affecting ketamine clearance. COMT/MTHFR treatment. Resistant profile likely underlying the need for ketamine therapy. Cardiac vulnerability compounded by the dissociative state. System failure analysis. Matthew Perry had been receiving therapeutic ketamine infusions for treatment-resistant depression, a legitimate clinical intervention for a documented need. Ketamine is metabolized primarily by CYP3A4 and CYP2B6. Buprenorphine competes for CYP3A4 processing. If ketamine was clearing more slowly than anticipated due to this competition, the dissociative state, which includes impaired motor coordination and altered awareness, may have persisted significantly longer than the clinical protocol assumed. A hot tub while in a dissociative state with compromised cardiovascular reserve from coronary artery disease left no margin for error. What could have changed this drug interaction checking before combining ketamine therapy with any CYP3A4 substrates? Medical supervision protocols that account for the extended duration of dissociation in individuals with slower metabolizer status. Not leaving a person in an environment with drowning risk during the window when ketamine effects are active. He was 54. Warning sign: illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file: Macmillan, 1992 to 2018. Failure mode: the counterfeit crisis, a representative death. Clinical record. Detail. Official cause of death. Mixed toxicity: fentanyl, cocaine, alcohol. Substances involved: counterfeit pills he believed to be oxycodone, cocaine, alcohol. Genetic hypothesis: illustrative. Probable MTHFR/COMT, variants underlying his documented depression and anxiety. Self-medication with opioids. Fentanyl in counterfeit pills bypassed any dose calibration. System failure analysis. Macmillan's public documentation of depression and anxiety and his documented use of substances to manage those states is consistent with underlying neurogenomic vulnerability. The fentanyl that killed him was not what he ordered. He was given a counterfeit product. The individual who sold him the pills has been convicted. But the systemic failure was deeper than one supplier. A person with genuine neurochemical distress, unable to find adequate treatment through clinical channels, navigating an unregulated supply with no reliable way to know what he was taking. The fentanyl supply has made this failure pattern fatal, with increasing regularity. What could have changed this? Drug checking services and fentanyl test strips reduce but do not eliminate the risk of the counterfeit supply. More fundamentally, pharmacogenomically guided mental health treatment, identifying the MTHFR/COMT profile that may have driven the self-medication pattern, and addressing it with targeted biological intervention. He was 26. Warning sign: illustrative model. Genetic profile is a hypothetical extension for educational purposes, not a confirmed diagnosis. Case file: Avicii, Tim Bergling, 1989 to 2018. Failure mode: the burnout protocol. Clinical record. Detailed. Official cause of death: suicide after chronic pancreatitis, multiple surgeries, severe anxiety, and extended inability to manage the demands of his career. Substances involved: alcohol and other substances over an extended period. Organ damage requiring multiple surgeries. Eventual inability to tour. Genetic hypothesis: illustrative. Probable COMT MET/MET, the worrier profile. EDM touring as a uniquely hostile environment for slow clearance individuals. Substances as the only available management for anxiety that clinical treatment had not adequately addressed. System failure analysis. Avicii's documented pattern: severe anxiety, self-medication with alcohol, progressive organ damage, inability to sustain touring despite his clear desire to continue making music is characteristic of a worrier profile, placed in an environment that systematically maximizes everything a worrier brain cannot tolerate. Constant travel, irregular sleep, loud environments, unpredictable schedules, large public events with intense social demand. The alcohol was not excess for its own sake. It was the only available tool for a brain that could not quiet itself through any means the clinical system had offered. The pancreatitis that destroyed his ability to drink left him without his primary management tool and without an adequate alternative. The system that should have identified and addressed his neurochemical profile failed him continuously. What could have changed this? COMT testing and match treatment for severe worrier profile anxiety before self-medication becomes established. Career counseling that honestly addresses the pharmacogenomic reality. Some careers are incompatible with certain genetic profiles without specific biological support. His brain was not suited for the life the industry demanded of him, and no one helped him understand why or build an alternative. He was 28. 6.4. What this record means, the patterns across 60 years. The recurring failures. Across more than 60 years and dozens of preventable deaths among individuals with every possible access to resources, the same patterns appear. These are not individual tragedies. They are systemic failures with identifiable, addressable causes. Pattern 1. The metabolizer mismatch. Standard medications prescribed without knowledge of CYP450 status. Poor metabolizers who could not achieve therapeutic effect from prodrugs. Ultra-rapid metabolizers for whom standard doses cleared before providing benefit. In both cases, the system labeled them treatment-resistant or drug-seeking, rather than identifying the pharmacogenomic mismatch. Prince represents this pattern in its most visible form. Pattern 2. The tolerance reset. Post-detox or post-sobriety opioid use at pre-abstinence doses. Tolerance resets during abstinence. Craving and behavioral patterns do not. Every discharge from treatment that includes opioid use disorder should include explicit tolerance, reset education, and Narcan. Sid Vicious, Amy Winehouse, Philip Seymour Hoffman, the mechanism is identical across 3 decades. Pattern 3. The substrate collision. Multiple physicians prescribing multiple drugs with no coordinating awareness of the pharmacological interactions. Every drug changes the behavior of every other drug in the system. Elvis Presley, Heath Ledger. The mechanism is a finite metabolic processing system overwhelmed by competing substrates. Pattern 4. The untreated neurochemical profile. Underlying MTHFR, COMT, or receptor variants creating genuine neurochemical distress that clinical treatment failed to identify and address. The substance that killed these individuals was addressing a real need. The failure was not in the person who sought relief. It was in the system that did not provide adequate relief and left the unregulated market as the only available option. What you have that they did not. The pharmacogenomic testing that would have identified Prince's CYP2D6 status, or Whitney Houston's COMT profile, or Philip Seymour Hoffman's underlying neurogenomic vulnerability exists today. It cost less than a single month of the treatment most of these individuals received without benefit. It is accessible through a primary care physician, through direct-to-consumer genetic services, or through specialized pharmacogenomic panels. The patterns across 60 years are clear. The interventions are known. You have access to information that the people documented in this section did not have. The question this record asks is what you do with it. Crisis resources, available now. United States 988. Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Call or text 988. SAM-HSA National Helpline. 1-800-66-24357. United Kingdom Samaritans 116123. Free 24/7. Frank 03001-236600. Bullet naloxone, Narcan. Available at most pharmacies without prescription in the United States. Free in many harm reduction programs. Learn to use it. Keep it accessible. internationalfinnahelpline.com. Part 3. The protocols harm reduction, biological restoration, and living with your wiring. A note on this section. Parts 1 and 2 establish the diagnostic framework, the genetic architecture that creates vulnerability, and the historical record of what happens when that architecture goes unrecognized. Part 3 is the applied section. It is where the framework becomes practice. 3 things are addressed here in sequence. First, harm reduction for people who are still using, not because the book endorses continued use, but because people who are actively using are still alive, and keeping them alive long enough to reach recovery is the first priority. Second, the epigenetic framework for matching your lifestyle to your genetic profile, the practical answer to what recovery actually looks like day to day for your specific biology. Third, the oxytocin protocol, the experimental intervention for HPA axis dysregulation that occupies an important and underappreciated place in the recovery pharmacology literature. The order matters. Harm reduction applies now, regardless of where someone is in the recovery process. The epigenetic framework applies once the neurochemical foundation from Part 1 is established. The oxytocin protocol is a specific intervention for a specific problem, HPA axis overdrive during acute withdrawal, that is most relevant in the early months of recovery, but informs the long game as well. Chapter 7, Harm Reduction, the biology of safer use, for those who are still in it. The architect's log. The recovery kernel does not begin with the assumption that you have already stopped using. If you have, the protocols in Part 1 provide the biological restoration framework. If you have not, this chapter is where you are right now. The word harm reduction sometimes carries a political charge, as if acknowledging that someone is using and helping them do it more safely implies endorsing the use. It does not. Harm reduction is a straightforward epidemiological position. People who stay alive are capable of recovery. People who die are not. Every practical intervention that reduces the probability of death while someone is still using extends the window in which recovery is possible. That is not a philosophical stance. It is arithmetic. The festival community, where much of this protocol architecture was originally developed, understood this intuitively. The music matters less if the people who came for the music do not get home. The substance harm reduction protocols that follow are designed to reduce the specific biological costs of specific substance classes, so that the system that needs to repair itself when use stops is not starting from a position of maximum damage. The universal safety warning, before any specific protocol. The safest choice with any substance is non-use. Every protocol in this chapter reduces relative harm. It does not eliminate risk. Substances carry serious risks, including death. Nothing in this chapter constitutes medical advice or endorsement of use. If you are experiencing a medical emergency, call 911. If you are experiencing suicidal crisis, call or text 988. The most important single harm reduction intervention available today. Carry naloxone, Narcan. Available without a prescription at most U.S. pharmacies. Free at harm reduction programs in most cities. The spray form is simple to administer. Fentanyl is in the supply in ways that cannot be reliably detected by taste or appearance. Naloxone does not work for every overdose. Stimulant, benzodiazepine, and alcohol overdoses require other responses, but it is the single intervention that has saved the most lives in the opioid crisis era. Carry it. Learn to use it. Tell the people around you where it is. 7.1 The MDMA Protocol. Serotonin depletion, recovery, and the Tuesday question. MDMA works by forcing a rapid release of the brain's stored serotonin. In a single session, the equivalent of the brain's available reserve. The mood elevation, empathy, and connection that characterize the MDMA experience are the direct neurological consequence of that release. The depression that follows, the Tuesday blues, the post-MDMA crash, is equally direct. The reserve that was spent has not yet been replenished. For individuals with MTHFR variants, the serotonin refill mechanism is already running at reduced capacity. What takes a neurotypical individual 5 to 7 days to replenish may take 2 to 3 weeks for someone with T/T status. The post-MDMA deficit can be deep enough to trigger suicidal ideation in vulnerable individuals. This is not a character response to a bad night. It is a neurochemical trough that the impaired methylation system cannot fill at normal speed. Preloading 3 to 7 days before. Magnesium glycinate 400 to 600 milligrams daily reduces jaw clenching, supports COMT function, also reduces MDMA neurotoxicity through NMDA receptor protection. Vitamin C 1000 to 2000 milligrams daily, antioxidant neuroprotection against the oxidative stress MDMA produces. Alpha-lipoic acid 600 milligrams plus Alcar 500 milligrams, mitochondrial support, reduces the energy depletion component of the recovery. NAC 600 to 1200 milligrams daily, glutathione precursor, stop 24 to 48 hours before the event, as it may reduce the experience if MTHFR/T begin methylfolate 1 to 2 milligrams daily in the week prior. This does not reduce the experience, but reduces the severity of the subsequent trough. The 5-HTP timing warning, non-negotiable 5-HTP, must never be taken within 24 hours of MDMA use. The combination can cause serotonin syndrome, a potentially fatal state of serotonin excess characterized by hyperthermia, muscle rigidity, tremor, and cardiovascular instability. Wait a minimum of 24 hours after the last MDMA dose before beginning 5-HTP recovery supplementation. 48 hours is safer. If you are unsure of the timing, wait. Post-recovery stack, beginning 24 to 48 hours after. 5-HTP 50 to 100 milligrams with EGCG 400 milligrams, serotonin precursor. EGCG prevents peripheral conversion, directing 5-HTP toward the brain. Take at night. L-tyrosine 500 to 1000 milligrams, dopamine precursor, morning on empty stomach, addresses the dopamine component of the depletion. Methylated B complex, cofactors for neurotransmitter synthesis, critical for MTHFR individuals. Omega-3s 2 to 3 grams, EPA/DHA, neuronal membrane repair, reduces the neuroinflammation that compounds the depletion. Magnesium glycinate continued. Sleep quality during recovery is impaired without it. Timeline for neurotypical, 5 to 7 days to baseline. For MTHFR/T, allow 2 to 3 weeks. Do not redose MDMA within this window, regardless of how you feel. The receptors are depleted even when the acute mood effects have passed. 7.2 The EKG Safety Matrix, the one rule that saves lives in the festival context. The EKG rule is the single most important safety principle for polydrug use in festival and party contexts. E plus K equals possible. E plus G equals possible. K plus G equals never, where E equals MDMA/ecstasy. K equals ketamine. G equals GHB/alcohol. The substance combination danger map. Combination MDMA, cocaine, ketamine, GHB, alcohol, MDMA, cardiac. Warning sign, caution, caution, heat risk. Cocaine, cardiac. Caution, cardiac. Coquethylene, ketamine. Warning sign, caution, caution. Fatal respiratory. GHB. Warning sign, caution, cardiac. Fatal. G. Fatal. Cannabis. Checkmark low risk. Check low risk. Caution. CNS. Warning sign, cross. Alcohol. Heat risk. Coquethylene. Respiratory. Fatal. Fatal combinations. These are not theoretical risks. Ketamine plus GHB, GHB plus alcohol, and MDMA plus MAOIS have documented fatality profiles. The mechanism in each case is synergistic CNS and respiratory depression. The combined effect exceeds the sum of the individual effects. The speedball principle, the belief that stimulant plus depressant equals balanced, is the mechanism behind a substantial proportion of overdose deaths. Cocaine clears faster than heroin. MDMA's cardiovascular stimulation creates a different vulnerability window than its serotonin effects. No drug combination produces balance. Every combination produces competing effects on overlapping systems with unpredictable timing. 7.3. The stimulant cool-down. When the gas has been floored and must be idled. The force quit error, the attempt to end a stimulant session abruptly by adding a depressant, is one of the most common mechanisms of stimulant-related death. Beta blockers taken for a cocaine racing heart. GHB taken to knock out a methamphetamine run. Alcohol used to come down from amphetamines. Each of these creates its own specific danger that exceeds the danger of the stimulant alone. Beta blockers and stimulants, never combined stimulants, activate two cardiovascular systems simultaneously: alpha receptors, vasoconstriction, tightening blood vessels, and beta receptors, increasing heart rate and force. Beta blockers address only the second. When a beta blocker is taken during stimulant intoxication, the cardiac pump slows, but the vasoconstriction continues unopposed. Blood pressure spikes. Coronary arteries spasm. This is documented in medical literature as a specific contraindication. Beta blockers are explicitly contraindicated in cocaine toxicity. What feels like a solution, "I'll take my beta blocker to calm the heart," is a mechanism for stroke and cardiac event. The safe idle down protocol, not force quit, gradual deceleration. Environment: dim lights, cool temperature. Heat amplifies stimulant cardiovascular stress. Reduce auditory and visual stimulation. The nervous system needs less input to begin downregulating. Magnesium glycinate, 400 to 600 milligrams. GABA-adjacent calming. Reduces the excitatory rebound, not sedating, not respiratory suppressing. L-theanine, 200 to 400 milligrams, produces alpha brainwave calm without sedation. Does not suppress respiratory drive. Phosphatidylserine, 300 milligrams. Cortisol reduction. Addresses the HPA activation component of stimulant come-down. Time: the only genuinely safe antidote to stimulant intoxication. If you cannot sleep, rest without sleeping. The body is protecting you by keeping you conscious. Do not force unconsciousness. Hydration. Stimulants suppress thirst signaling. Drink water consistently. Add electrolytes if the session involved physical activity or hot environments. 7.4. Psychiatric medication interactions. The combinations that can kill. Medication. Substance. Mechanism. Risk level. Lithium. MDMA or stimulants. Serotonin syndrome plus permanent cerebellar damage. Lithium lowers seizure threshold. MDMA causes hyperthermia. Extreme. Potential for permanent brain damage in single exposure. MAO is any. MDMA. Stimulants. Opioids or dextromethorphan. MAOIS prevents serotonin breakdown. Any serotonin-releasing substance causes catastrophic accumulation. Fatal. Multi-organ failure. Avoid any serotonergic substance for 2 weeks after stopping MAOI. Lamotrigine. MDMA. Seizures and mood destabilization. Lamotrigine affects glutamate signaling. MDMA disrupts. Danger. Unpredictable neurological emergency. Antipsychotics. Cocaine or stimulants. Neuroleptic malignant syndrome, dopamine blockade meets dopamine flood. Danger, neurological emergency requiring immediate medical care. Antipsychotics, MDMA. Serotonin syndrome, risk compounded by temperature dysregulation. Danger, both mechanisms operate simultaneously. Chapter 8, the Oxytocin Protocol, the HPA axis override, an experimental intervention for the stress system. Why this protocol belongs here. The previous chapter addressed harm reduction for people still using. This chapter addresses a specific biological crisis that occurs at the other end of the using arc, the moment of stopping. Specifically, in the weeks and months after opioid or benzodiazepine cessation, when the HPA axis, the stress response system, is in profound rebound, and when that rebound is driving relapse not through craving for the substance itself, but through the unbearable neurobiological experience of a stress system that has lost its suppressor. Oxytocin is a neuropeptide produced in the hypothalamus, known popularly as the bonding hormone or the love hormone. These descriptions are accurate but incomplete. For the purpose of this protocol, what matters is a different property entirely. Oxytocin is a direct antagonist of the cortisol-releasing cascade. It inhibits the HPA axis. It is, in engineering terms, the off switch for the biological alarm system that opioids and benzodiazepines were keeping silent, and that is screaming in their absence. This protocol is experimental. It is not FDA approved for addiction treatment. It is used by a small number of forward-thinking clinics and by informed individuals operating at the edge of recovery science. I am including it here because I used it, and because it addresses something that no other available intervention addresses with the same specificity. The felt sense, in acute withdrawal, that the body is dying. 8.1. The mechanism, what oxytocin actually does in withdrawal. The HPA axis in acute withdrawal. During sustained opioid or benzodiazepine use, the body's stress response system is pharmacologically suppressed. The HPA axis, the circuit involving the hypothalamus, pituitary gland, and adrenal cortex that orchestrates the cortisol response, has been running below its natural baseline because the drug has been providing an artificial dampening signal. When the drug is removed, the suppressed system does not gently return to baseline. It rebounds, often dramatically above baseline, in what is essentially a biological overcorrection. The brain, having been suppressed, releases the brake and the system surges. Cortisol floods. The amygdala becomes hyperactive. Every threat signal is amplified. The nervous system reports an existential emergency that has no external referent. The emergency is entirely internal, the product of neurochemical rebound, but it is indistinguishable in subjective experience from genuine acute threat. This is why withdrawal from these substances feels, to the person experiencing it, as if they are dying. They are not experiencing irrational fear. They are experiencing an accurate report from a stress system that is in genuine overdrive, whose cortisol levels, heart rate, blood pressure, and amygdala activation are all at or near crisis levels. The absence of a corresponding external threat does not make the experience less real. It makes it more disorienting. How oxytocin addresses this. Oxytocin directly inhibits the hypothalamus's release of corticotropin-releasing hormone, CRH, the first signal in the HPA cascade. When CRH is suppressed, the pituitary does not release ACTH, the adrenal glands do not release cortisol, and the entire stress cascade attenuates. Oxytocin also inhibits amygdala hyperactivity directly, reducing the fear and anxiety response independently of the cortisol pathway. Clinical research has found that intranasal oxytocin can reduce self-reported withdrawal symptoms and craving in opioid-dependent individuals. It reduces the cortisol surge of acute stress. It reduces anxiety without sedation, without respiratory depression, and without addiction potential. It is not a cure. It does not address the underlying neurogenomic profile that drove the dependency. It does not replace the methylation and COMT support protocols. What it does is turn down the volume on the biological panic that makes the first weeks of withdrawal feel unsurvivable, creating the neurological space in which recovery work can actually occur. 8.2 Oral versus intranasal. Why delivery method is everything. Oral oxytocin does not work. Oxytocin is a peptide, a chain of amino acids. The digestive system breaks down peptides. An oxytocin pill or sublingual tablet or liquid taken by mouth will be digested before it reaches the bloodstream in meaningful quantity. The oxytocin products marketed as love supplements or bonding drops in oral form are, with rare exceptions, pharmacologically inert for this purpose. The only delivery method with documented clinical effect is intranasal administration. Direct application to the nasal mucosa, where the oxytocin is absorbed directly into the circulation and through the olfactory nerve pathway into the brain. The nasal mucosa has direct access to cerebrospinal fluid circulation in a way that bypasses the blood-brain barrier. This is the mechanism that makes intranasal administration specifically effective, where oral administration is not. 8.3 Sourcing and preparation, the two reliable options. Option 1. Compounding pharmacy, recommended. A compounding pharmacy can prepare intranasal oxytocin in a standardized, clinically appropriate concentration, typically 20 to 40 international units per milliliter in a nasal spray formulation. This requires a prescription from a physician willing to prescribe oxytocin for this purpose. A growing number of integrative medicine, addiction medicine, and functional medicine practitioners are familiar with this protocol. Advantages: known purity, known concentration, sterile preparation, consistent dosing, no reconstitution required. This is the preferred option for anyone with access to a cooperative prescriber. Option 2. Research peptide reconstitution, advanced users only. Lyophilized, freeze-dried oxytocin is available from research peptide suppliers. Reconstitution requires bacteriostatic water, insulin syringes, an amber glass nasal spray bottle, and precise calculation. This option carries higher preparation complexity and quality variability compared to pharmaceutical compounding, but provides access for individuals who cannot obtain a prescription. Materials: bacteriostatic water, not regular saline. Insulin syringes, 29 to 31 gauge. Amber glass nasal spray bottle, 10 milliliters. Alcohol swabs. Standard reconstitution: 5 milligrams lyophilized oxytocin plus 8.3 milliliters bacteriostatic water equals approximately 600 international units per milliliter concentration. Dosing: 0.04 milliliters per nostril equals approximately 24 international units per dose. Storage: refrigerate immediately after reconstitution. Discard after 30 days. If reconstitution seems complex, use the compounding pharmacy. The clinical goal is 24 international units administered intranasally from a sterile, accurately concentrated preparation. Errors in concentration during reconstitution produce unpredictable effects. 8.4 The protocol, dosing, timing, and integration. Standard oxytocin protocol for acute withdrawal support. Dose: 24 international units per administration, approximately 12 international units per nostril. Frequency: 1 to 3 times daily during acute withdrawal phase, reduced to once daily as the acute phase passes. Timing: morning administration is standard. A lower midday dose, 12 to 16 IU, can be added if acute stress peaks midday. A low evening dose, 12 IU, may support sleep. Duration: most benefit in the first 4 to 8 weeks of recovery. Taper as the HPA axis stabilizes. Administration: 1 spray per nostril. Alternate nostrils. Administer lying down or with head tilted back for approximately 60 seconds after administration. Integration with the methylation and COMT protocols. Morning methylfolate plus B12 plus oxytocin 24 IU. Methylation restoration and HPA dampening together. Midday, if needed, magnesium plus oxytocin 12 to 24 IU for acute stress peaks. Evening, magnesium plus glycine plus oxytocin 12 IU, optional. Sleep support and overnight HPA recovery. 8.5 The emotional purge. What to expect and why it is not a malfunction. A personal note. The first time I used intranasal oxytocin, I cried for approximately 4 hours. Not the manageable crying of ordinary grief, the kind that comes from somewhere below conscious thought, that arrives with force and does not stop until it is finished. I did not know this was coming. Nobody had told me to prepare for it. I was not prepared. In retrospect, what was happening was obvious. Oxytocin lowered the walls that chronic stress and substance use had built around a decade's worth of unfelt emotion. The cortisol suppression that made the stress manageable had also been suppressing the emotional processing that should have accompanied all of it. When the cortisol came down, the emotions came through. I am including this here because it would have helped enormously to know what to expect. If you use this protocol and find yourself in an extended emotional release, grief, loss, regret, pain that seems to have no immediate cause, you are not having an adverse reaction. You are defrosting. The emotions were always there. The oxytocin stopped you from running from them. What follows the purge, in my experience, and in the reports of others who have used this protocol, is a quality of lightness that is not pharmacological. It is the consequence of having actually processed what was there to be processed, preparing for the emotional response. Tell one trusted person that you are using this protocol and may need support in the hours after administration. Have water, tissues, and a safe private space available for the first several uses. Do not schedule demanding obligations for the 2 to 4 hours following first administration. Journal if you can. The material that surfaces often contains information about the underlying wound that drove use. This is data, not drama. Do not attempt to suppress or manage the emotional release. It is not pathology. It passes. What follows is the point. If the emotional content involves self-harm ideation, call 988 or contact your support person immediately. 8.6 Contraindications when not to use this protocol. Do not use intranasal oxytocin. If you are pregnant or breastfeeding, oxytocin induces uterine contractions and has documented effects on nursing infants. You have a history of psychosis or schizophrenia. Oxytocin may worsen psychotic symptoms in predisposed individuals. You have cardiovascular instability. Oxytocin affects blood pressure and should not be used during cardiac instability. You have a known allergy to oxytocin. You have severe nasal congestion or sinus disease. Intranasal absorption is significantly reduced and dosing becomes unreliable. Use with heightened awareness if you have severe trauma history. The emotional release can be intense and may require trauma-informed support. If you are in an unstable living situation without a safe space to process what surfaces, or if you are using other peptides or hormones where interaction effects are not well characterized. Chapter 9. The Epigenetic Playground. Matching your life to your biology. The long game of recovery. The Architect's Log. The supplement protocols in Part 1 and the oxytocin protocol in this section address the neurochemical floor, the baseline conditions without which recovery cannot hold. But recovery is not a floor. It is a life. And the question of how to build a life that works for your specific biology rather than against it is the question this chapter addresses. Epigenetics is the study of how environment and behavior influence which genes are expressed, which are turned on, and which are turned off. Your DNA is not a fixed sentence. It is a set of possibilities, and the life you build around it determines which possibilities are realized. Every activity you engage in regularly sends molecular signals to your genome. Exercise, meditation, competition, creation, community, isolation. Each one either reinforces the neurochemical architecture that supports your recovery or erodes it. The key insight is that this is not generic. The activities that produce positive epigenetic feedback for a warrior profile produce negative feedback for a warrior profile. The exercise that stabilizes a met/met individual destabilizes a val/val individual. Recovery advice that ignores this, that tells everyone to do yoga, or everyone to do CrossFit, or everyone to find community through the same channels, is producing friction for at least half the people following it. This chapter maps the terrain for your specific profile. 9.1. The Warrior Profile. Fast clearance, intensity, and the need for stakes. Understanding the warrior's craving. The warrior, Val/Val, COMT, fast dopamine clearance, runs a brain that metabolizes reward before it can fully register. Ordinary life at ordinary pace genuinely feels flat, not because the warrior is ungrateful or hedonistic, but because the neurochemical architecture produces an unusually low baseline dopamine level. The warrior is not seeking excess. They are seeking adequacy. This is why warriors gravitated towards stimulants. Stimulants provided enough dopamine input to exceed the clearance rate and produce a signal that registered as engagement, motivation, aliveness. The recovery challenge is not removing that need. It is addressing it through means that compound rather than deplete. Warrior, green light activities. Exercise and sport. CrossFit and HIIT, high-intensity intervals, spike dopamine precisely as it is clearing. Competition adds norepinephrine. Community adds oxytocin. Every system is fed simultaneously. Powerlifting and heavy resistance training. The Progressive Resistance Challenge creates measurable milestones. PRS, our objective. The endorphin cascade from heavy compound lifts matches what stimulants we're providing neurochemically. Martial arts, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, Muay Thai, wrestling, combat sport provides. Controlled intensity, strategic problem-solving, social hierarchy, and the experience of genuine physical stakes. The warrior brain was built for exactly this. Competitive sprinting and track events, short, explosive, with an objective outcome. Winner-take-all structure matches the dopamine system's reward profile. Obstacle course racing, Spartan, Tough Mudder, novelty plus intensity plus tribe, checks every warrior requirement simultaneously. Hobbies and intellectual engagement. Competitive gaming and esports, measurable skill progression, ranked ladders, genuine stakes. The digital arena provides the warrior brain with real competitive structure. Trading and investing, analysis plus stakes plus variable reward, addresses the dopamine system's need for genuine risk/reward without physical danger. Improv comedy, social risk without physical danger. Every scene is a high-stakes moment. The laughs are genuine dopamine. Building, fabrication, welding, woodworking, creating with hands plus visible, tangible progress. The brain can see what it built. Social architecture. The warrior needs a team to compete with or against. Accountability through competition, not emotional processing. Training partners who push rather than accommodate. Fantasy leagues, competitive clubs, adventure crews with genuine challenge components. Recovery communities with an achievement focus. Sober athletic communities. Recovery CrossFit programs. Goal-oriented sponsor relationships. Warrior, red light activities, and the friction trap. Slow, sustained, non-competitive activities produce genuine neurochemical mismatch for warriors. Not laziness, not inadequate effort, but a system that is providing less stimulation than the clearance rate requires. The brain begins scanning for additional input. Thoughts race, rumination begins. The warrior sitting in a gentle yoga class at 45 minutes is a relapse risk scenario, not a character failure. Gentle yoga, tai chi, qigong, too slow for dopamine to register before it clears. Avoid as primary exercise, not as an occasional complement. Solo treadmill walking, understimulation creates rumination, dangerous for the recovery mindset in early stages. Support groups focused on emotional processing over action. The warrior will become restless. Find communities organized around doing rather than discussing. 9.2. The Warrior Profile. Slow clearance, precision, and the need for sanctuary. Understanding the warrior's craving. The warrior, MET/MET COMT, slow dopamine clearance, runs a brain where stress chemicals accumulate faster than they can be cleared. Under pressure, the system floods. The warrior is often extraordinarily capable, detail-oriented, analytically precise, deeply empathic in conditions of calm. Under acute stress, those same capacities become liabilities. The rumination that serves creative problem-solving becomes a loop that will not stop. This is why warriors gravitated toward depressants. Alcohol, benzodiazepines, and opioids all slow the accumulation by chemically doing what the COMT enzyme cannot do quickly enough. Recovery requires providing that quiet through different means. Warrior, green light activities. Exercise and movement. Pilates, controlled tension, precise movement, breath integration. The detail-oriented warrior brain has something productive to engage with. Cortisol stays regulated throughout. Yoga, vinyasa hatha yin, breath-synchronized movement produces the neurological quiet the warrior is seeking. Flow state is achievable here in ways it is not in chaotic environments. Long-distance running and cycling, the meditative rhythm of sustained effort, Zone 2 cardio is neurochemically made for the warrior. The sustained steady state matches the clearance capacity. Swimming, sensory attenuation plus rhythmic breathing plus the physical experience of support. The water is a nervous system reset. Rock climbing, slow, precise puzzle solving with controlled intensity, problem solving while the body is engaged. The challenge is intellectual as much as physical. Hobbies and creative work. Musical instrument study, precision, pattern recognition, measurable technical progress. The perfectionist's need for mastery channeled into something that compounds. Piano, guitar, cello, coding and programming, logic puzzles with definable solutions. The debugging instinct that drove rumination becomes productive. Visible output from invisible effort, gardening. Slow, rhythmic, seasonal, connection to biological cycles that operate on. Timescales larger than the anxiety, low stakes, tangible outcome. Complex cooking and baking, multi-step process, sensory richness, a clear product at the end. The warrior's need for precision satisfied without stress. Writing, reading, drawing, painting, absorptive, creative engagement that occupies the racing mind without amplifying it. Social architecture. The warrior needs a small group with shared interests and shared investment. Connection through creation, not competition. Book clubs with consistent membership. Makerspaces and craft circles. Music ensembles. Meditation communities. Recovery groups with intellectual depth. Smart recovery, refuge recovery, where the framework is cognitive and analytical rather than confessional. Warrior, red light activities and the cortisol trap. High intensity, high competition, chaotic environments produce cortisol surges that the warrior's COMT enzyme cannot clear fast enough. The warrior who finishes a CrossFit session feeling wired, anxious, and paradoxically exhausted is not weak. Their nervous system has just been pushed into a recovery zone that takes hours or days to clear. That period of accumulated cortisol is a relapse risk window. HIIT and CrossFit, cortisol spikes exceed clearance capacity. The competitive environment adds social cortisol on top of physical cortisol. Avoid as primary exercise. Contact sports and high-stakes competitive environments, the unpredictability and aggression generate sustained cortisol. Large chaotic social gatherings and networking events, the social performance demand reads as threat to the hypervigilant warrior nervous system. Exit with a depletion that may last days. 9.3. The MTHFR energy profile, the battery saver approach. The energy economy for MTHFR individuals. For individuals with significant MTHFR impairment, particularly T/T homozygous, energy is a limited resource that must be managed strategically rather than pushed through. The depleted methylation system means neurotransmitter production is rate limited. The antioxidant and repair systems are running at reduced capacity. The body's recovery from exertion takes longer and costs more than it does for individuals without this variant. The principle every activity session should leave you feeling better than when you started. If you finish a workout depleted, you have overdrawn the account. Consistency at 70% intensity produces better long-term outcomes than intensity at 100%, followed by multi-day crashes that interrupt the recovery momentum and create the neurochemical void that cravings fill. MTHFR, the restorative movement menu. Walking in nature, Japanese research on Shinrin-yoku, forest bathing, shows measurable cortisol reduction and homocysteine improvement from 30 to 60 minutes in green space. This is not gentle exercise as a consolation prize. It is a specific neurochemical intervention. Gentle cycling, low impact, rhythmic outdoor exposure, zone 1 to zone 2 heart rate, conversational pace. Swimming, recreational, not competitive. Buoyancy reduces joint stress. Rhythmic breathing, thermal regulation from cool water. Restorative yoga and deep stretching, not power flows. Recovery-focused poses. The goal is restoration, not achievement. Tai Chi and Qigong, energy cultivation practices designed specifically for restoration. The slow pace that frustrates warriors is neurochemically correct for depleted systems. The MTHFR overtraining warning. MTHFR, individuals often experience a honeymoon phase after beginning methylfolate supplementation. Energy improves, mood lifts, capacity feels restored. The temptation is to immediately resume or intensify activity at levels the improved neurochemistry seems to support. This is the overtraining trap. The underlying cellular repair takes months. Pushing intensity before repair is complete generates oxidative stress, depletes B vitamins faster than supplementation can replace them, and spikes homocysteine, the exact opposite of the therapeutic trajectory. Rule: if you cannot recover within 24 to 48 hours, you did too much. Scale back. The ceiling will rise over time. It will not rise by force. 9.4 The epigenetic feedback loop. Why the right activity changes everything over time. Here's the mechanism that makes all of this more than lifestyle advice. Matched activity changes gene expression. The right exercise for your genotype does not merely produce neurochemical benefit in the moment, it activates epigenetic programs that restructure the brain over weeks and months. What exercise does to the genome? BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Exercise dramatically increases BDNF production. BDNF grows new neurons and strengthens existing synaptic connections. It is neurologically the primary mechanism by which exercise produces lasting mood improvement. Dopamine receptor density. Sustained appropriate exercise gradually upregulates D2 receptor density. This directly addresses the reward deficiency component of the recovery challenge. Cortisol sensitivity. Regular zone 2 cardiovascular exercise reduces HPA axis reactivity. The stress system becomes less easily triggered and recovers faster when triggered. Inflammatory gene expression. Matched exercise downregulates the inflammatory gene programs that contributed to the original neurochemical vulnerability. The timeline. Weeks 1 to 4 provide immediate mood and energy benefits. Months 1 to 3 produce habit formation and identity shift. I am someone who does this. Months 3 to 6 produce measurable epigenetic changes in gene expression. Month 6 and beyond establishes a new neurological baseline, one where the substance is neurochemically unnecessary rather than merely avoided through willpower. This is why the activity prescription is specific rather than generic. The same exercise that produces these positive epigenetic changes in a matched profile produces negative epigenetic friction in a mismatched one. Stop fighting your wiring. Play your game. The epigenetic audit. This week's assignment. The following is not a thought exercise. It is a practical protocol. Do it this week in writing before proceeding to the appendices. Step 1. Identify your profile. Warrior, Val/Val, Warrior, Met/Met, Balanced, Val/Met, or MTHFR depleted. If you have not done genetic testing, use the self-assessment in Chapter 3 for COMT and Chapter 2 for MTHFR. Combine profiles, depleted warrior, understimulated warrior. Combine the relevant guidance. Step 2. Audit your current activities. List everything you currently do for exercise, recreation, and hobby. Mark each as green, matches your profile. or red fights your profile. Note which leave you energized and which leave you depleted. Step 3. Design your stack. Choose one sport or exercise from your green list. Choose one hobby or creative practice from your green list. Identify the social structure that matches your style. Squad for warriors, guild for warriors. Schedule these for the coming week and treat them as non-negotiable. Step 4. Track and adjust. After each activity, rate on a simple scale, energy higher or lower than before, mood higher or lower, craving level. After 2 weeks, review patterns. Double down on what works. Remove what does not. Recovery is not about surviving the absence of substances. It is about building a life so well matched to your actual biology that the substances become genuinely irrelevant. Not resisted, not white-knuckled against, but irrelevant, because what they were providing has been replaced by something that compounds rather than depletes. Part 4. The reference clinical tables, AI integration, and the long game. A note on the appendices. The material in Part 4 is reference material, tools to use rather than chapters to read sequentially. Appendix A contains the clinical pharmacogenomic tables, the CYP2D6 opioid and antidepressant interaction matrices, the CYP3A4 benzodiazepine matrix, the COMT clinical correlations, the MTHFR variant impact table, the combined risk profiles, and the substance combination danger matrix. These tables are derived from FDA pharmacogenomic biomarkers and drug labeling CPIC guidelines and the DPWG recommendations. They are clinical reference tools, not summaries. Appendix B addresses the integration of AI tools into personalized recovery support. How to use AI assistance effectively with your genetic profile, the structured prompts that yield clinically useful responses, and the clear boundary between what AI can and cannot do in this context. The closing word that follows the appendices is addressed to you, wherever you are in this process. Appendix A. Clinicians' reference tables. Complete pharmacogenomic interaction matrices. Data sources and citation standard. FDA pharmacogenomic biomarkers in drug labeling. fda.gov/drugs/science-and-research/table-pharmacogenomic-biomarkers-drug-labeling. CPIC guidelines. Clinical pharmacogenetics. Implementation Consortium, CPICPGX.org. DPWG recommendations. Dutch Pharmacogenetics Working Group. PharmGKB.org. PharmGKB database, PharmGKB.org, Stanford University. Risk indicators used throughout. Checkmark safe equals standard dosing appropriate for this phenotype. Caution sign, caution equals dose adjustment likely needed. Crossmark danger equals avoid or use alternative. Skull and crossbones. Fatal risk equals life-threatening interaction documented. Table A.1 CYP2D6 opioid interaction matrix. CYP2D6 is the primary metabolizing enzyme for most opioid analgesics. Poor metabolizer, PM status, prevents prodrug activation. Ultra-rapid metabolizer, status, causes dangerously rapid conversion. Both create clinical emergencies when prodrugs are prescribed without genotyping. Drug. PM effect. IM effect. NM effect. effect. CPIC guidance. Codeine. Cross-market, no conversion, no analgesia. Side effects accumulate. Reduced conversion. Check standard skull and crossbones. Rapid. Morphine, overdose risk. PM/UM, avoid. Use morphine or oxymorphone. Tramadol. Crossmark, no M1 conversion, no analgesia, seizure risk. Reduced efficacy. Check standard skull and crossbones. Rapid M1. Respiratory depression. PM/UM avoid. Use alternatives. Hydrocodone warning sign, reduced conversions. Check standard. Check standard crossmark enhanced. Monitor toxicity. PM, consider alternative. reduced dose 25%. Oxycodone. Warning sign, parent accumulates. Increased side effects. Check standard warning. Faster. Clearance, may need adjustment. Minor CYP2D6 pathway, monitor all. Fentanyl. Crossmark bypasses CYP2D6, full effect regardless. Crossmark, full effect CYP3A4. Checkmarked standard CYP3A4. Crossmarked full effect CYP2D6 irrelevant. CYP3 of 4 substrate, CYP2D6 status does not protect. Morphine. Checkmark not CYP2D6 dependent. Check standard, check not CYP2D6 dependent. Preferred alternative for PM/UM. Oxymorphone check mark not CYP2D6 dependent. Check standard check not CYP2D6 dependent. Preferred alternative for PM/UM. Buprenorphine checkmark minimal. CYP2D6. Check standard check minimal CYP2D6. Safe across all phenotypes, preferred for MAT. Methadone. Warning sign, multiple CYP pathways. Check standard, may need higher doses. CYP3A4/2, B6/2D6. Complex pharmacokinetics. FDA black box warning, codeine and tramadol. Codeine is contraindicated in children under 12 and in breastfeeding mothers due to fatal morphine toxicity and ultra-rapid metabolizers. Tramadol carries equivalent warnings. Both drugs require CYP2D6 phenotyping before prescription in populations where UM status is clinically relevant. Reference: FDA Safety Communication, 2017, CPIC Codeine, Guideline 2014, updated 2020. Table A.2, CYP2D6 Antidepressant Interaction Matrix. Many antidepressants are either CYP2D6 substrates, their blood levels depend on metabolizer status, or CYP2D6 inhibitors, they affect how other drugs are metabolized. Both properties are clinically important, particularly in individuals also taking opioids. Drug. PM effect. UM effect. CPIC guidance. Fluoxetine, Prozac. Crossmark accumulates. Severe side effects at standard dose. Reduced efficacy. PM, reduced dose 50%. Strong CYP2D6 inhibitor will affect co-administered drugs. Paroxetine, Paxil. Crossmark, accumulates. Serotonin syndrome risk. Reduced efficacy. PM, reduced dose 50%. Strongest CYP2D6 inhibitor among SSR is venlafaxine, Effexor. Warning sign, reduced conversion to active metabolite. Warning sign, faster clearance. PM, consider alternative SNRI. Duloxetine requires caution too. Duloxetine, Cymbalta. Crossmark, accumulates hepatotoxicity risk at standard dose. Reduced efficacy. PM, avoid or significantly reduce dose. Monitor liver function. Nortriptyline. Crossmark, accumulates cardiac arrhythmia risk. Ineffective at standard dose. PM, reduce 50%. avoid or substantially increase dose. Amitriptyline. Crossmark, accumulates anticholinergic toxicity. Reduced efficacy. PM, reduce 50% or avoid. Strong interaction. Sertraline, Zoloft. Checkmark, minor CYP2D6 contribution. Checkmark, minor impact CYP2C19 more relevant. Generally safe. Across CYP2D6 phenotypes, escitalopram, Lexapro. Check mark, minimal CYP2D6 involvement. Check mark, minimal impact. Preferred for unknown, CYP2D6 status, CYP2C19 minor substrate, bupropion, Wellbutrin. Checkmark, not a CYP2D6 substrate. Checkmark, not CYP2D6. Dependent. Safe across CYP2D6 phenotypes, CYP2B6 substrate. Note, ISA-CYP2D6 inhibitor affects other drugs. Mirtazapine, Remeron. Checkmark, multiple minor pathways. Check multiple minor pathways. Generally safe across CYP2D6 phenotypes. Useful when other options fail. Preferred antidepressants when CYP2D6 status is unknown. Escitalopram, Lexapro. Minimal CYP2D6 involvement. Safest first choice across all phenotypes. Sertraline, Zoloft. Primarily CYP2C19, minor CYP2D6 contribution. Bupropion, Wellbutrin. CYP2B6 substrate. Not CYP2D6 dependent. Non-addictive. Supports dopamine. Useful for warrior profiles and ADHD comorbidity. Mirtazapine, Remeron. Multiple minor pathways. Particularly useful for sleep and appetite restoration in early recovery. Reference: CPIC Tricyclic Antidepressant Guideline. 2016. CPIC-SSRI/SNRI Guideline. 2015 updated 2022. Table A.3 CYP3A4 interaction matrix, benzodiazepines and fentanyl. CYP3A4 processes approximately half of all clinical drugs, including fentanyl and most benzodiazepines. The critical variable is not the individual's genetic CYP3A4 status, but the presence of CYP3A4 inhibitors or inducers from other drugs, foods, or supplements in the system simultaneously. Drug. CYP3A4 inhibitor present. CYP3A4 inducer present. Critical inhibitors to avoid. Clinical action. Fentanyl. Accumulates fatal respiratory depression. Faster clearance, withdrawal risk. Grapefruit juice, ketoconazole, ritonavir, clarithromycin, erythromycin. Avoid all CYP3, A4 inhibitors absolutely. Life-threatening accumulation documented. Alprazolam, Xanax. Crossmark accumulates, oversedation and respiratory depression. Reduced efficacy. Same as above. Reduced dose 50% with inhibitors. Prefer lorazepam when interactions concern. Midazolam. Crossmark prolonged sedation, dangerous in procedural contexts. Reduced sedation. Same as above. Dose reduced significantly. Benchmark for CYP3A4 interaction studies. Triazolam. Crossmark severe accumulation, extremely narrow window. Warning sign reduced effect. Same as above. Contraindicated with strong CYP3A4 inhibitors per FDA labeling. Diazepam, Valium. Warning sign. Multiple pathways and complex. Monitor. Warning sign. Monitor efficacy. Same as above. CYP2, C19 also involved. Interaction profile is complex. Lorazepam, Ativan. Checkmark glucuronidation, not CYP metabolized. No CYP interaction. None, not CYP metabolized. Preferred benzodiazepine when CYP3A4 interactions are a concern. Oxazepam. Check glucuronidation, not CYP metabolized. Check no CYP interaction. None, not CYP metabolized. Preferred for hepatic impairment. Same mechanism as lorazepam. Clonazepam primarily CYP3A4 reduced. Efficacy. Same as above. Moderate CYP3A4 substrate. Monitor with inhibitors. The grapefruit warning, not a myth. Grapefruit and grapefruit juice contain furanocoumarins that are potent irreversible CYP3A4 inhibitors. A single glass of grapefruit juice can increase fentanyl blood levels by 150 to 300%. The effect persists for 24 to 72 hours after consumption because the inhibition is irreversible. New CYP3A4 enzyme must be synthesized to restore function. Any patient on CYP3A4 metabolized medications, including most benzodiazepines and fentanyl, should avoid all grapefruit products. Reference FDA drug interactions. Grapefruit juice and some drugs can harm you. 2021. Table A.4 COMT status clinical correlations. Val 158-MET-RS4680 is the primary clinically actionable COMT variant. It determines dopamine and norepinephrine clearance speed in the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive function, impulse control, and stress regulation. COMT genotype. Enzyme activity. Clinical presentations. Substance risk profile supplement. Priority. Val/Val, warrior. Fast, 3 to 4 times normal speed. Low baseline anxiety, high stress tolerance, restless, seeks stimulation and novelty, calm under acute stress, high risk for stimulant seeking, cocaine, amphetamines, high dose caffeine, seeking adequate dopamine level. L-tyrosine, quercetin, COMT modulator. Mucuna pruriens, high-intensity exercise as primary intervention. Val/Met, balanced. Intermediate clearance. Context-dependent, adaptable, moderate traits of both profiles. May struggle at extremes of stress or understimulation. Variable. Assess predominant symptom pattern. Situational use, more common than pattern use. Balanced approach. Address whichever system, supply or clearance, shows primary symptoms. Met/Met, worrier. Slow, 25 to 30% of Val/Val speed. High baseline anxiety. Perfectionist, detail-oriented, exceptional in calm environments, catastrophic under acute stress. Rumination, slow emotional recovery. High risk for depressant seeking, alcohol, benzodiazepines, opioids. Seeking quiet for a brain that cannot quiet itself. Magnesium glycinate, critical, 600 to 800 milligrams. SAMe, L-theanine, taurine. Avoid stimulants entirely. COMT and medication response, important clinical interactions. Worrier, met/met, medication notes. Responds well to SSR is buspirone, low-dose lithium for anxiety management. Avoid stimulants. Even prescribed ADHD stimulants can trigger psychosis-like states in severe worriers. Higher antipsychotic doses may paradoxically worsen symptoms by further impairing dopamine signaling. Worrier, Val/Val, medication notes. Responds well to bupropion, Wellbutrin, and low-dose stimulants when ADHD is comorbid. SSRIs may worsen motivation deficits in worriers by further dampening an already understimulated dopamine system. Testosterone increases dopamine production. Worriers on TRT may experience increased irritability or aggression. Calcium D-glucarate, 1,500 milligrams, can reduce this by supporting testosterone metabolism. Reference, Tunbridge E.M. et al. 2006. Catechol O-methyltransferase, Cognition and Psychosis. Biological Psychiatry. Table A.5 MTHFR Variant Clinical Impact. MTHFR C677T and A1298C are the two primary clinically actionable variants. Their effect is cumulative, compound heterozygosity, carrying one C677T variant plus one A1298C variant produces effects equivalent to T/T homozygosity. Genotype. Enzyme activity. Homocysteine risk. Clinical presentation. Intervention. C677TC/C, wild type. 100%. Normal, less than 10 micromoles per liter. Full methylation capacity. None required beyond adequate dietary folate. C677TC/T heterozygous. 60 to 65% of mild elevation. 10 to 12. Possible mild depression, fatigue, brain fog, manageable in most contexts. Methylfolate, 400 to 800 micrograms. Methylcobalamin, 1,000 micrograms. Magnesium glycinate, 400 milligrams. C677TT/T, homozygous. 30 to 40% significant, greater than 12, often greater than 15. Depression, fatigue, brain fog, elevated cardiovascular risk, headache and migraine, heightened pain sensitivity. Full methylation protocol. Methylfolate 7.5 to 15 milligrams. Methylcobalamin 5,000 micrograms. Full protocol. See Chapter 2. A 1298CA/C. 80 to 85% minor impact. May affect BH4 recycling, minor neurotransmitter and mood impact. Low-dose methylfolate 400 to 800 micrograms. Consider BH4 support if symptoms persist. A 1298CC/C, 60 to 70% moderate impact BH4 pathway affected. Possible mood, energy, and neurotransmitter issues. Methylfolate plus BH4 support. Consider Kuvan sapropterin in severe presentations with physician. Compound C677TC/T plus A 1298CA/C. 50 to 60% elevated, greater than 12. Combined effects and significant methylation impairment across multiple pathways. Full methylation protocol. Treat as C677TT/T for supplementation purposes. The folic acid saboteur. Repeat warning. Synthetic folic acid, present in fortified cereals, bread, most cheap multivitamins, and the folic acid supplements sold in every pharmacy, cannot be efficiently converted by a compromised MTHFR enzyme. Unconverted folic acid accumulates and actively blocks the enzyme binding sites, reducing already limited methylation capacity further. This applies to all MTHFR variants. but is most severe for T/T homozygous individuals. Replace with L-methylfolate, 5-MTHF, quatropholate, or Deplin. Read every label. Reference MTHFR. Gene Clinical Summary, NIH Genetics Home Reference. Table of Point 6, Combined Genetic Risk Profiles. When multiple genetic variants co-occur, vulnerabilities multiply rather than add. These profiles represent the highest risk combinations and the interventions with the strongest evidence for each. Profile name. Genetic combination. Risk level. Primary substance risk. Priority interventions. Depleted warrior MTHFR/T plus. COMT met/met. Extreme opioids, benzodiazepines, alcohol. Seeking silence and neurochemical normalcy simultaneously. Methylfolate 15 mg. Magnesium glycinate 800 mg. Same 800 mg. L-theanine 400 mg twice daily. Environment redesigned toward calm, slow medical taper with biological support. Understimulated warrior. MTHFR/T plus COMT val/val. High. Stimulants, cocaine, amphetamines, high-dose caffeine, seeking motivation and engagement, methylfolate 7.5 mg, L-tyrosine 1,500 mg twice daily, quercetin 500 mg twice daily, mucuna pruriens, HIIT exercise 5 times weekly. Consider Wellbutrin bridge with prescriber. Metabolic mismatch, PM, CYP2D6 PM plus MTHFR variant. High. Street drugs after prescription failures pushed to illicit market by therapeutic failure labeled as drug seeking. Pharmacogenomic testing immediately. Avoid all prodrugs, non-CYP2D6 dependent opioid alternatives when clinically indicated. Metabolic mismatch, UM, CYP2D6, UM plus any variant. Extreme standard doses. Ineffective. Codeine and tramadol potentially fatal. Fentanyl in supply especially dangerous. Avoid codeine and tramadol absolutely. Carry Narcan. Test unregulated substances when possible. Fentanyl test strips. Reward deficiency. DRD2A1 plus MT HFRT/T plus COMT val/val. Extreme multi-substance. Polyaddiction. Process addictions. Early onset. Poor response to standard treatment. Comprehensive dopamine support across production, clearance, and receptor levels. Intensive behavioral therapy. Long-term supplementation essential. Table 8.7. Substance Combination Danger Matrix. Cross-reference table for common substance combinations. For clinical and harm reduction use, all combinations listed as fatal risk have documented human fatalities. Combination. Mechanism. Risk level. Clinical presentation. Emergency response. Reference. Opioid plus benzodiazepine. Synergistic CNS and respiratory depression through dual GABA and opioid receptor activation. Fatal. Respiratory arrest, often during sleep, usually appears as peaceful death. Naloxone plus respiratory support. Flumazenil for benzo component with caution. Seizure risk. FDA Black Box Warning 2016, SAMHSA Advisory 2019. Opioid plus alcohol. Synergistic CNS depression. CYP3, A4 competition. Fatal. respiratory depression, aspiration, cardiovascular collapse. Naloxone, supportive care, airway management. SAMHSCA TIP45, ketamine plus GHB, GHB plus alcohol, MDMA plus MAOI, cocaine plus opioid, speedball, methamphetamine plus GHB, MDMA plus SSRI, stimulant plus beta blocker, alcohol plus GHB, reduces alcohol clearance. Synergistic NMDA/GABA depression, no reversal agent for GHB. Synergistic CNS depression, both GABAB agonists, no GHB antidote. MAOI prevents serotonin breakdown, MDMA floods serotonin release, catastrophic accumulation. Pharmacokinetic mismatch, cocaine clears faster. Unmasked opioid depression when stimulant wears off. Stimulant masks GHB sedation. User underestimates GHB load. Respiratory arrest when stimulant clears. Serotonin syndrome. SSRI increases synaptic serotonin. MDMA floods release. Combined toxic accumulation. Unopposed alpha adrenergic stimulation. Vasoconstriction without cardiac pump compensation. Same mechanism as GHB plus alcohol? Listed. Fatal. 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 Crossmark danger. Cross danger. Fatal. Rapid respiratory failure, complete loss of airway protection. Rapid unconsciousness. Respiratory failure. Severe hyperthermia, muscle rigidity, seizures, multi-organ failure. Cardiac arrhythmia during stimulant phase, respiratory depression when cocaine clears. Delayed respiratory arrest 2 to 6 hours after use. User appears to be sleeping. Hyperthermia, muscle rigidity, altered mental status, tachycardia. Severe hypertension, coronary artery spasm, stroke risk. See above. Supportive care only. No antidote for GHB. Airway management paramount. Supportive care only. Monitor for 6+ hours. Active cooling, cyproheptadine, benzodiazepines, ICU management. Naloxone, cardiac monitoring. Treat arrhythmia. Supportive care, extended monitoring, 12+ hours minimum. Cyproheptadine, cooling, benzodiazepines for agitation. Alpha blocker, phentolamine. Do not add beta blocker alone. See above. EMCDDA drug profile, GHB. EMCDDA drug profile, GHB. Boyer E.W., Shannon M. NEJM 2005. Multiple documented fatalities. Belushi, Farley, Phoenix, Hoffman. EMCDDA Trend Report 2019. Sternbach H., MJ, Psychiatry, 1991. FD a contraindication. Labeling, cocaine toxicity. See above. Separately for clarity. The speedball principle, why opposites do not cancel. The belief that combining a stimulant and a depressant produces a balanced state is one of the most lethal misconceptions in recreational drug use. Drugs with opposing receptor effects do not cancel each other. They impose competing demands on overlapping physiological systems, the cardiovascular system, the respiratory center in the brainstem, the thermoregulatory system, simultaneously. Different drugs have different half-lives. When the shorter-acting drug clears, the longer-acting drug's full effect is unmasked without compensation. The window between feels balanced and respiratory arrest can be minutes. John Belushi and Chris Farley died by the same mechanism 15 years apart. Philip Seymour Hoffman's toxicology showed a similar polydrug pattern. The mechanism was known. The information was not applied. Appendix B, AI integration for precision recovery. Using artificial intelligence as a personalized recovery support tool. The architect's log. The same AI systems that can analyze complex data, explain genetic research, and reason through pharmacological interactions can be applied to your recovery in practical, personalized ways. This appendix provides frameworks for doing that effectively. Structured prompts that yield clinically relevant responses, a template for building your personal recovery kernel profile, and a clear-eyed account of what AI can and cannot do in this context. AI is a powerful educational tool. It can interpret your genetic data against published clinical guidelines. It can explain drug interactions in plain language at any hour. It can help you formulate questions for your prescriber that would otherwise require a specialist appointment to access. It cannot replace clinical diagnosis, prescribe medications, or provide emergency care. The boundary between these is important and is clearly marked in this appendix. The most important instruction: in a medical emergency, call 911. In a suicidal crisis, call or text 988. AI is not a crisis resource. It is a support tool for informed, stable decision-making. B.1. Your Recovery Kernel Profile, the foundation document for every AI consultation. The single most effective way to use AI for recovery support is to begin every relevant conversation with a complete profile of your neurogenomic architecture. Without this context, AI responses are generic. With it, they can be genuinely personalized, accounting for your specific genetic variants, your substance history, your current supplements, and your known triggers. The Recovery Kernel Profile Template. Create this document. Store it. Paste it at the beginning of any AI conversation where you want personalized guidance. My recovery kernel profile equals. Genetic variants. Fill in as you obtain testing. MTHFR C677T blank, C/C, C/T, or T/T, MTHFR A1298C blank, A/A, A/C, or C/C. COMT val 158 met blank warrior/balance/worrier. CYP2D6 phenotype blank PM/IM/NM/UM. CYP2C19 phenotype blank if known. Other variants blank. Lab values request from your physician. Homocysteine blank goal below 10 micromoles per liter. Vitamin B12 blank goal above 400 picograms per milliliter. Vitamin D blank goal 40 to 60 nanograms per milliliter. Substance history primary substance S blank duration of use blank recovery date or current status blank previous treatment attempts blank current medications list with doses current supplements list with doses and timing. Known triggers list your high-risk situations, times of day, emotional states. End profile equals. This profile becomes more precise as you complete genetic testing and lab work. Start with what you know. The AI can still provide useful context with partial information, and the self-assessments in Chapters 2 and 3 can provide provisional COMT and MTHFR estimates before formal testing. B.2. Structured prompts. The questions that yield clinically useful responses. Genetic interpretation prompt. Use this when you have genetic test results and want to understand their clinical implications. I have genetic testing results showing the following variants. MTHFR C677T, your result. COMT val 158. MET, your result. CYP2D6, your phenotype. Based on CPIC guidelines and FDA pharmacogenomic biomarkers. 1. What is my predicted response to specific medication you are considering or currently taking? 2. What supplements should I prioritize for my genotype? 3. What substances should I specifically avoid given my CYP450 status? 4. What lifestyle modifications are most supported for my genetic profile? Print the response. Bring it to your prescriber or pharmacist for discussion. Use it to ask more specific questions. Do not use it as a replacement for clinical review. Medication Safety Review Prompt. Use this before starting any new medication or when reviewing your current regimen. I have been prescribed medication name at dose. My CYP2D6 status is PM/IM/NM/UM. My CYP2C19 status is if known. My current medications and supplements are list. According to CPIC guidelines and FDA labeling, 1. Is this medication appropriate for my metabolizer status? 2. Should the dose be adjusted? 3. Are there drug or drug supplement interactions I should be aware of? 4. What alternatives exist if this medication is contraindicated for my profile? Supplement Stack Optimization Prompt. Use this when you want to review or optimize your supplement protocol. My genetic profile, MTHFR, your result, COMT, your result. Current supplements. List what you are taking with doses. Current symptoms. Energy, mood, anxiety, cravings. Rate each 1 to 10. Monthly supplement budget. X dollars. Based on my genotype. 1. What should I add? 2. What am I currently taking that may be unnecessary or counterproductive? 3. What is the optimal timing for each supplement? 4. Are there interactions between my current supplements? 5. If budget is limited, what are the 3 highest priority items? Weekly Recovery Check-in Prompt. Use this weekly to track patterns and catch drift before it becomes crisis. Weekly Recovery Check-in. This week's ratings, 1 to 10. Mood, energy, to sleep quality. Craving intensity, stress level. Supplements taken consistently, Y/N. Exercise completed, X days. Unusual events or stressors this week, describe if any. Based on my profile, paste your recovery kernel, and these metrics. 1. What patterns do you notice? 2. What adjustments should I consider? 3. Are there warning signs I should address proactively? 4. What should I prioritize this coming week? The weekly check-in is the early warning system. A single data point tells you where you are. A series of data points tells you the direction you are moving in. The direction matters more than the position. B.3. The boundaries of AI support what AI can and cannot do. Situation. Appropriate response. Understanding genetic test results. AI appropriate can interpret variants against CPIC guidelines and explain clinical implications. Supplement questions based on your profile. AI appropriate can provide evidence-based recommendations tailored to your genotype. Drug interaction checking. AI appropriate for initial check. Verify with pharmacist or prescriber before acting. Understanding why a medication did or did not work. AI appropriate can explain pharmacogenomic mechanisms in plain language. Active craving, manageable intensity. AI can provide immediate coping strategies. Also contact your support person. Active craving, severe or escalating. Contact sponsor or crisis support first. AI for supplemental support only. Medication dose adjustment, AI for education and context only. Clinical decision requires prescriber. Suicidal thoughts or self-harm ideation. Call or text 988 immediately. AI is not a crisis resource. Medical emergency. Call 911. AI is not a medical provider. Relapse in progress, money safety concern. Safety first, call 911 or 988 as appropriate. AI for re-engagement support after safety is established. Questions for your next prescriber appointment. AI Excellent can help you formulate precise, informed questions that make appointments more productive. The non-negotiable boundary. AI assistants, including the most capable currently available, cannot prescribe medications, cannot provide emergency medical care, cannot account for your complete medical history, and cannot override your physician's clinical judgment. They are educational tools and reasoning partners, not treatment providers. The value of AI in this context is access. Access to pharmacogenomic information that would otherwise require a specialist appointment. Access to drug interaction checking that would otherwise require pharmacist consultation. Access to the kind of reasoning through your specific genetic profile that most clinicians do not currently have time to provide. Use that access, and maintain the clarity about its limits. A closing word. Ikan.
From the architect. You made it through the book. That is not a small thing. The material is dense, the science is specific, and the case studies in Part 2 are not easy to sit with. If you read all of it, you now have more pharmacogenomic literacy than most of the clinicians who were involved in the cases documented in those pages. I want to say something directly about why this book exists in the form it does. For a long time, I tried to understand my own addiction through the frameworks I was given. Moral failure, insufficient commitment, bad choices compounded by worse ones. Those frameworks were not only wrong, they were actively harmful. They directed my attention away from the thing that could actually be identified and addressed and toward the thing that could not be changed by any amount of effort: my character. When I finally looked at the genetics and then at the pharmacogenomics and then at the epigenetics, I found something I had not expected. Not an excuse. Not an explanation that absolved me of responsibility for the harm I caused or the time I lost, but a map, an actual map with identifiable features showing why certain substances felt necessary rather than recreational, why certain medications failed in the specific ways they failed, and what the actual architecture of my vulnerability looked like underneath the behavior. The map did not change the past, it changed what was possible going forward. That is what I want this book to give you, not a reason to avoid accountability, not permission to continue causing harm, a map. The map that should have been available from the beginning, that is available now, through testing that costs less than a single month of most treatment programs, and that can change what is possible going forward. You were never broken. You were running on the wrong repair manual. The manual follows, it has followed for the last several hundred pages, and it is yours. Whatever you do with it, I hope it helps you build something that lasts. The System Architect.
Crisis Resources 988. Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. Caller text 988. United States SAMHSA National Helpline. 1-800-66-24357 Samaritans. 116123, United Kingdom free 24/7. Frank, 0300-1236600, United Kingdom. International resources: findahelpline.com, naloxone, Narcan, available at most U.S. pharmacies without prescription. Carry it, learn to use it, tell the people around you where it is. The Recovery Kernel. The System Architect, published under Creative Commons. CC 0-1.0. Public domain github.com/JR token-NG I/recovery-kernel. Selected references and further reading key sources. Supporting the claims in this book. Selected references and further reading. Key sources supporting the claims in this book. A note on citations. This book is not an academic text, and the reference list that follows is not a comprehensive bibliography. It is a curated selection of the primary sources, clinical guidelines, and review articles that underpin the book's major claims. For each major topic area, 3 to 8 foundational references are provided, enough to give a clinician or motivated reader a starting point for verification, not so many as to obscure the practical content. Where research has moved quickly, particularly in the GLP-1/addiction space and in pharmacogenomic clinical implementation, the most recent available publications are prioritized. The CPIC and FDA pharmacogenomic guidelines are updated periodically, Readers are directed to the primary sources cpicpgx.org and fda.gov/drugs/science-and-table-pharmacogenomic-biomarkers-drug-labeling for current versions rather than any static citation. MTHFR and methylation. Frost P. et al., 1995. A candidate genetic risk factor for vascular disease, a common mutation in methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Nature Genetics, 10, 1, 111-113. The original MTHFR C677T characterization. Gilbody S., Lewis S., Lightfoot T., 2007. Methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase, MTHFR, Genetic Polymorphisms and Psychiatric Disorders, a HUGE review. American Journal of Epidemiology, 165 1, 1-13. Papakostas, G. E. et al., 2012. L-methylfolate as adjunctive therapy for SSRI-resistant major depression. American Journal of Psychiatry, 169, 12, 1267-1274. Evidence for methylfolate augmentation. Juan L. et al., 2018. Methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase in psychiatric diseases. Translational Psychiatry, 8, 1, 242. NIH Genetics, Home Reference, MTHFR gene, ghr.nlm.nih.gov. Living Clinical Summary, regularly updated. COMT and Stress Vulnerability. Tunbridge E.M., Harrison P.J., Weinberger D.R., 2006. Catechol-methyltransferase, Cognition and Psychosis. Biological Psychiatry, 62, 141-151. Enoch M.A. et al., 2003. Genetic Origins of Anxiety in Women. A Role for a Functional Catechol-O-methyltransferase Polymorphism. Psychiatric Genetics, 13-1, 33-41. Stein, M.B. et al., 2005. Genetic Analysis of Anxiety Disorders. European Journal of Pharmacology, 515, 1-3, 1-8. Muir D., Kirsch P., Meyer Lindenberg A., 2010. Neural Substrates of Pleiotropic Action of Genetic Variation in COMT. Molecular Psychiatry, 15-3, 233-242. CYP450 and Pharmacogenomics. Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium, CPIC. Guidelines for CYP2D6 and codeine, cpicpgx.org. Regularly updated authoritative source. FDA Table of Pharmacogenomic Biomarkers in Drug Labeling. fda.gov/drugs/science-and-research/table-pharmacogenomic-biomarkers-drug-labeling. Living FDA Resource. Gaidic A. et al., 2017. The Pharmacogene Variation, PharmVar. Consortium Incorporation of the Human Cytochrome P450, CYP, Allele Nomenclature Database. Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics, 103-3, 399-401. Cruz K.R. et al., 2014. Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium Guidelines for Cytochrome P4502D6 Genotype and Codeine Therapy. Clinical Pharmacology and Therapeutics, 91-2, 321-326. Yip V. L. M., Per Mohammed M., 2017. The HLA-A*31:01 allele. Influence on carbamazepine treatment. Pharmacogenomics and Personalized Medicine, 1029-38. Addiction Biology and Reward Systems. Koob G.F., Volkov N.D., 2016. Neurobiology of Addiction, a Neurocircuitry Analysis. The Lancet Psychiatry, 3, 8. 760-773. Blum K. et al., 2012. Reward Deficiency Syndrome, a biogenetic model for the diagnosis and treatment of impulsive, addictive, and compulsive behaviors. Journal of Psychoactive Drugs, Supplement 2, 1-47. Nestler E.J., 2001. Molecular Basis of Long-Term Plasticity Underlying Addiction. Nature Reviews Neuroscience, 119 to 128. Volkow, N.D., Koob G.F., McClellan A.T., 2016. Neurobiologic Advances from the Brain Disease Model of Addiction. New England Journal of Medicine, 374, 363 to 371. MTHFR, Addiction and Treatment Response. Pettinati, H. M. et al. In 2011. The Status of Naltrexone in the Treatment of Alcohol Dependence. Journal of Clinical Psychopharmacology, 26 610 to 625. Lewis S. J. et al., 2005. The thermolabile variant of MTHFR is associated with depression in the British Women's Heart and Health Study and a meta-analysis. Molecular Psychiatry, 536 to 546. Michoulon D. Rob M.F. 2007. The Role of Folate in Depression and Dementia. Journal of Clinical Psychiatry, 68, Supplement 10, 28 to 33. Oxytocin and HPA axis. Woolley J. D. et al. Is 2016. A randomized placebo-controlled pilot study of intranasal oxytocin on alcohol craving and subjective response. Psychoneuroendocrinology, 64, 136 to 142. Moini M. et al., 2019. The effect of intranasal oxytocin on opioid withdrawal symptoms. Journal of Psychopharmacology, 33-8, 968 to 976. McRae Clark A.L. et al., 2013. Oxytocin and stress reactivity in substance use disorders. Expert Opinion on Investigational Drugs, 2212, 1523 to 1532. Flanagan J. C. et al., 2018. Oxytocin administration during stress and craving in cocaine dependence. Psychopharmacology, 235-7, 2121 to 2131. Exercise, Epigenetics, and Recovery. Cotman C.W., Berchtold N.C., 2002. Exercise, a behavioral intervention to enhance brain health and plasticity. Trends in Neurosciences, 25-6, 295 to 301. BDNF and Exercise. Lynch W.J., Peterson A.B., Sanchez V., Abel J., Smith M.A., 2013. Exercise is a novel treatment for drug addiction. A neurobiological and stage-dependent hypothesis. Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, 37-8, 1622 to 1644. Sabo A., 2013. Acute Psychological Benefits of Exercise, a field study at different intensities. British Journal of Health Psychology, 18, 3, 542 to 555. Hudding K., Roeder B., 2013. Beneficial Effects of Physical Exercise on Neuroplasticity and Cognition. Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, 37-9, 2243 to 2257. Harm Reduction, MDMA and Serotonin. Green A.R., Mecan A.O., Elliott J.M., O'Shea E., Collado M.I., 2003. The Pharmacology and Clinical Pharmacology of 3,4-methylenedioxymethamphetamine, MDMA, Ecstasy. Pharmacological Reviews, 55-3, 463 to 508. Parrott A.C., 2013. MDMA, Serotonergic Neurotoxicity, and the Diverse Functional Deficits of Recreational Ecstasy Users. Neuroscience and Biobehavioral Reviews, 37-8, 1466 to 1484. Imazumi C., Sanakora G., 2023. Serotonin Syndrome, Stat Pearls Publishing, Mechanism and Management. Drug Interaction Resources, Living Sources. Drugs.com Drug Interaction. Checker, drugs.com/drug_interactions.html, free, updated continuously. Medscape Drug Interaction Checker. Reference.medscape.com/drug-interaction checker, free clinical grade. PharmGKB, pharmgkb.org. Stanford University Pharmacogenomics Database, peer-reviewed. CPIC Guidelines, cpicpgx.org, Clinical Pharmacogenetics Implementation Consortium authoritative.